Hey everyone, got a new commentary for you here on one of my favorite movies, Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, the the Roadshow Director's Cut, I believe it's called. You should know, given the runtime of this video, which version uh, you could sync this up to, which is what we're doing. We're recording commentary. You can watch alongside, or you can just listen to it as its own standalone thing. But either way, we're going to do a countdown and then we're going to start the movie. So you can watch alongside us if you'd like to by pressing play when we hit 0. All right. You ready, Pat?
I was born ready.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
Choir singing. That's the first thing that comes up in the subtitles. And yeah, Ridley does love his choirs, doesn't he? Especially for these historical epics.
It does. Well, the score is done by James Newton Howard. Not James Newton Howard, Harry Gregson Williams. Sorry. Another 3
Yeah,
named
yeah, The
guy.
Rock. I was associating with The Rock and the Metal Gear Solid games.
Exactly. I know him from Metal Gear. Then I discovered that he was a composer and for movies as well. And God, he's so good.
A
In
lot of
fact,
Tony Scott, right?
yeah, he also did Man on Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, he did The Martian, Last Duel, House of Gucci, X-Men Origins, Wolverine. Come on.
The best
Yeah,
one,
Man on
obviously.
Fire, Black Hat. Although that's kind of suspect. I don't think that's true actually. Um, yeah, he's kind of a little bit underrated. Although I got to say, him doing like 4 Shrek movies is not
Oh
good.
no, please,
Not
we can
good.
just we can ignore that.
Yeah, sorry
That's
we're
a
talking about
mulligan.
Shrek during Kingdom of Heaven. So this overture, love movies with overtures. Bring it back. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful, especially
I
with music
mean,
like this.
oh yeah, and like this movie in particular, it's just like the main thing that it does for me is it just transports you to like this what's the word, fulminating, like this, like, chaotic, intense, like, just this dense cauldron of history, and like you're just in the place, and the
Well, the
music.
the sense of
Yeah,
time and place is so palpable in this, probably more than any of his other movies outside of like maybe Blade Runner, where it just evokes completely the feeling of the Crusades. And like this movie has gone on to like influence a whole bunch of stuff. Like basically every single media that vaguely touches the Crusades, I think takes a lot from the presentation of this movie. Like the first Assassin's Creed game, it's very Kingdom of Heaven esque, both in like tone and in politics and aesthetically. Um, but yeah, I think for me watching this movie, it's like Ridley at the height of his powers. Truly, it's him coming off of this early 2000s run where he's just making movie after movie after movie every single fucking year, and you're just like, holy shit, it kind of starts with Gladiator, right, and then
yeah,
just goes into this whole run. And I feel like a lot of people, when they think about this movie, they're like, oh, it's a lesser version of Gladiator. When although I love Gladiator, like to me, like that's kind of the testing ground for a lot of stuff that he does here, which is more apt, more confident, more perfect.
yeah. I mean, he cranks it all the way up for this one, and I think that he did Gladiator, and then he did like Matchstick Men, and he did Hannibal, and I think he did Black Hawk Down, and he
Yes,
spent some time away from the genre, and then this is him coming back swinging.
yeah, and I think this is him kind of doing the mic drop of like, I own this, like this is my shit, like
He
there's no one who's
absolutely
gonna do this
does.
better than me.
And first shot of the movie, we get the cross, and then we get the Crusaders coming in to meet Balian.
Yeah, we also get the great thing that half of his movies do, where it's just like a little bit of text at the beginning to set things up. And I always love movies that have that. It always reminds me of Godard, who wasn't afraid to just display, whatever kind of text that he felt was pertinent to his movies and didn't feel like it was out of place. And when you do it at the beginning, it's very effective as a setting tool and just being like, okay, this is what you need to know, and we're just going to get right into the story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just perfect in this. It's just a little bit. It's just enough to kind of like, situate us in a time and place. But yeah, here we've got the grave diggers and Balian's wife, who, she lost a baby in miscarriage and committed suicide, and now his asshole priest of a brother is about to desecrate the corpse.
Yeah, so I've never seen the theatrical cut because it's like, why would I? And I'll tell you,
Terrible.
like when I listen to people talk about what was cut out of this movie, it's fucking criminal. And a lot of the stuff, like you don't even know that this character is his brother in the fucking
Yeah.
theatrical. It's like,
You just think
what?
he's some asshole. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, I saw this the theatrical version when it first came out, and then there was a brief like it was out for like a weekend or a week in LA, the director's roadshow version, and my girlfriend at the time, we went and saw it and we were just blown away. Like it was a completely different film. I think it has like 40 minutes plus additional footage.
Oh man, the snow effects here, they're so amazing. I love like this early part of the movie when we're in France, just the ambient snow that's gathered everywhere. It looks perfect. It looks just you get such an energetic feeling in every frame because like some of the snow is out of focus and some of it is like in the background it's all whirling everywhere. It's so the texture of it is so visually pleasing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would you say that Ridley kind of that's a signature of his, or I mean, you know, he's the deploys it in the most
I
effective
think he
way.
first does it in Legend. I remember that
Ah,
movie having some of this, yeah, but not to this level, but it does have that.
now the Crusaders here, the like Dirty Dozen,
Yeah, yeah, the
so well cast.
Liam Neeson's like Seven Samurai Boys, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially there's a guy with pigtails, and like these arms the size of watermelons, and like I love that character. He has so few lines, and there's a great moment that's coming up where he's gonna be like eating a chicken or something, and then he uses one of his pigtails to wipe his mouth. I fucking love that.
Oh, I never noticed that before. That's incredible.
And then David Thewlis as Hospitaller. Um, and see, you're more familiar with the history. Like like Hospitaller was like an order of knights, wasn't it? Or
Yeah, so you had several orders of knights, which were kind of like half mercenaries, half bankers, half like they're basically organizations that were designed to like provide safe transport between Europe and the Holy Land. And these were set up. They were like auxiliary parts of the church, but they weren't really a part of the church. And yeah, it's this interesting combination of you had uh, priests and mercenaries and you know uh, accountants and vagabonds and yeah, there's no real equivalent to them now, but yeah, you had like the Templars, you had the Hospitallers, you had like several other groups, and like these were the ones who were like, all right, like we're gonna get the ships that'll transport people to who want to fight to the Holy Land, and we're gonna organize raids and kind of set up the infrastructure that allowed any of this to take place. Because the first Crusade, like right now, like this movie, I think takes place a little after the second or during, because the Third Crusade kind of starts in like 1189 AD, and the First Crusade was basically a disaster because you had just a bunch of uh, like peasants and like illiterate people who were just like, okay, you can go to the Holy Land and just colonize it, and there's just land there for the taking, and you don't have anything in Europe, so the
Mhm.
idea very much felt like it was the Wild West, right? It's like you could go, and for people who had nothing in Europe, you could go there and make something of yourself as like a fighter for the church and all of that. And when you had that, what you essentially had was like a bunch of people who had never been outside of their tiny villages, just marching across Europe trying to get to the fucking Middle East, and they never really got there. And the First Crusade was just basically them like like getting lost and perpetuating atrocities on the way there, and like doing a whole bunch of really terrible, like there's also like this huge amount of like anti-Semitic massacres and destruction, and like it was a total wash. And so when you look at that, you can kind of understand why they felt like, okay, we need to set up like an actual way to do this instead of just telling people, go east. you just you don't want to do that
Go east
because
and be rich. Yeah.
yeah. um but yeah, like so when this film takes place, like we kind of have that set up, and um we're on the Second Crusade. I don't know how many there were. I know there's at least 4 or 5, And I know like it kind of stopped in earnest, like the closer you get to the 14th century, I'm pretty sure, but I might be
Hmm.
wrong.
Now, William Monahan wrote the screenplay, and this was around the time
Yes.
he was hot. He wrote The Departed.
I
I
like him. I listened to the
yeah,
commentary with him. He's a really like astute guy, I think.
yeah. I think like I love the screenplay for this. I think it's a valid criticism to make. However, that it's very secular, or like the characters in it. You know, like are there is a sort of like I don't know. Is postmodern the right word? Like they're talking about like the what's the nature of Christendom? What does it mean to be Christ-like? What does it mean to be godly? It's like, and Balian in particular is like super woke for a knight to have existed in this time. I think that's worth it though. I mean, if you're kind of like if you're puncturing the membrane a little bit, I think it's in the service of some really
Well,
interesting ideas.
you know, I used to think that exact same thing as you, but what I realized actually reading more literature from the time was that like people weren't just like crazed dogmatic lunatics. Like there was a healthy amount of skepticism towards the church and religious institutions. It's just that it wasn't framed in terms of like being an atheist or whatever. And it's not framed that way in this movie either. And it's actually I think it's like what you point out is almost like we're kind of looking at this, we say like, oh, isn't this a bit secular? But actually, like the way that people wrote back then and discussed things, it wasn't so much about like, you know, like is this like, do I believe this or not? It was more like how do I navigate this world, and like is there a way that makes sense, right? And so it was people trying to make sense of things within the framework. And so if they rejected like the church's God, what it meant was that they have like their own personal way of worship or whatever. It wasn't
Mm,
like, you know, we're just going to throw out everything. Like the idea of like secularism just didn't really exist, and it didn't really exist until like after Protestantism. So the way
mm,
this movie approaches it, I think, is pretty. I don't know. Like I don't really care about accuracy, but I do think it is pretty valid in that you have this character who's been traumatized, and he's kind of, you know, looking for meaning in this world, and so he has to come to his own evaluation of, you know, what does honor mean, what is my purpose, you know, if there is you know, if there is a purpose to following a holy path and that kind of thing, especially when he's faced by his brother here who's just a piece of shit, right? So you have different definitions of what righteous action is and what godliness is, still within the space of Christianity. Like it's much more pluralistic and complicated than I think we assume from media, especially
yeah.
like history. It's like you read the, you know, like you are educated in like school basically that everyone back then was just, yeah, like a fucking lunatic and like a dogmatist, and that really wasn't true. There was a lot of people who were like, I don't really like the church, but the church as an institution held a lot of power still, and so you had to reckon with that no matter what. It was kind of like now it's like, you know, we can be skeptical towards like the current form of like social organization, but we still want like a social organization, right? We just don't want the version that exists now. So you know,
Yeah.
like there was heresies back then, right? The Cathars, you had alternative churches and rogue priests who were kind of doing their own thing. So yeah, it's just more complicated than we're led to believe usually.
Sure. And you know, you look at the contrast between Balian and his brother, and the brother, he's not really a seeker. He's just he's found a place and a place where, you know, he's justified in, you know, ripping off corpses and, you know, defiling, you know, his brother's wife and just kind of pushing his brother around, the clearly kind of like more competent, gifted brother. Through the church, he's able to, you know, kind of exploit and dominate. And that, you know, and I would say there's a much lower ceiling on that type of faith than on Balian's, who's really, he has been traumatized and he's looking for answers.
Yeah, and he has to define it outside of the system that he was, you know, born and created in.
We've got to talk about Orlando Bloom. I think if there was a more compelling protagonist at the center of this movie, it would be too powerful almost.
Well, because I think a lot of people overly hate on him, And I think he's actually great in this movie. And I think he's underrated as a screen presence. I think his strongest asset is that he presents like an earnestness. He presents uh, like a straight man persona that I think is valuable and I think really works in this story because everyone else is corrupt, everyone else is cynical, everyone else is damaged, everyone else feels like they're like, okay, like, you know, this world is shit and like nothing can be done. But at the end of the day, it's only his like discovery of his principles and his dedication to them that ends up saving like the people of Jerusalem from just being completely destroyed, right? Like everyone else
Yeah.
leaves and he's the one who gives enough of a shit to be like, all right, well, we have to do something. And so like I really like that, especially in like the Pirates films too. You know, he brings that earnestness. Like his character's not like a thieving, terrible scumbag. He's like, you know, he's a guy who's just trying to make his way in like a crazy world. And so I think he's actually a great center for these types of movies where there's this sense of history and all these, you know, characters coming in and out, and you have to reckon with different perspectives. And he is able to talk with all of them and perceive all of them in a way that's again like pluralistic and uh, has a sense of understanding, and like he's able to move in different strata of society, right? Like I like how this movie begins with him, you know, kind of being on the down and outs, and like, you know, he becomes, you know, this important person in Jerusalem, and then he just loses it all, like everyone else loses their home. You know, like there's a sense in which him being estranged allows him to move throughout these strata of society and to achieve a perspective that none of the people who are actually kind of set in the society can understand.
Right. He's the man with nothing to lose. So that gives him a tremendous amount of mobility and versatility, adaptability, I guess.
Yeah, and I also like him being a blacksmith. It like really grounds his character in a sense of like labor, right? Because like in the scene we had before, he's like, you know, like we work, let's get to work.
Yeah.
And throughout this movie, he's constantly working on things. He's working on himself, on his soul. He's working on the land around him when he irrigates the land of his estate. You know, he's working on his armor here. He works on his fighting technique. There's a sense in almost like a Bildungsroman Roman idea of a man, you know, like going through labors to try and forge himself into a better person and to a more holistic rendition of like who he's meant to be. And
Right
I
on.
really like that as a structure of just grounding the character in like his activity and his labor, um, and kind of in like the various jobs that he can perform. Where, you know, he's engineering industrial machines, and you know, he's in a way this movie almost like, I think the secular thing that you spoke about, it's like he's almost in a way he's like a prototype for a modern character who is not stuck within the boundaries of class or within the boundaries of, you know, a profession or, you know, whatever. We see that as like being kind of like modern, right, as being like itinerant, but it did exist back then. I think this character is a testament to like this stuff has always existed. And you know, you can have, you know, someone who is defined by what they do rather than, you know, what they say or whatever. I think that's what makes him different from everyone else, and it's what makes him, you know, it's what makes Saladin respect him later in the movie, is because you can see like this is a man who acts righteously, and even though we're on different sides, like he understands where I'm coming from.
Right. And I mean, we got to talk about Liam Neeson, obviously, but I mean, just the title and I bring it to mind in a host of contexts, the Kingdom of Heaven. You know, it's something we'll never attain, but it's the pursuit of it that's important,
Exactly.
and bringing the kingdom to, it's not the literal kingdom. It's, you know, it's relationships.
Well, because later in
It's
the movie he says
yeah.
it's a kingdom of conscience or nothing at all, right? It has to be, you have to make yourself into the image of Christliness as much as you can, right? It's not
Mhm.
about like reaching a place. It's about using experience to make yourself into a person who can make anywhere that kind of place, right? You can be anywhere, do anything, but act as if you are within, you know, the Holy Land, basically. And when you see him return at the end of the movie to this place, like he's kind of, he's faced with a renewed hope and optimism. He's able to be like, you know what, let's, I grew things there. I was able to accomplish things there. Let's do that back here as well instead of trying to fight these people. And so it takes
Right.
his experience to produce something that's fruitful instead of destructive.
Right, and maybe it's more important that he tries to grow things back here at the end, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's so like despondent here. I mean, this is like the classic Ridley stuff where you have like ye olde times, everyone's covered in dirt and it's just filthy and shitty and just which I don't doubt that that existed at a certain point, but like Ridley's he really does emphasize like everyone's covered in smudge.
Yeah.
And
And then there's 110 and he's the blacksmith.
yes, exactly. Although even here he's like dirty, like you see him, he's got like dirt
Yeah.
on his fingernails, all this kind of stuff. Um,
This part's awesome, by the way. Like stabbing
oh yeah,
his
the
brother
behind
with
the
his
scenes
molten
stuff here where they
sword.
actually set a guy on fire, it's nuts.
Yeah, so Liam, his father, who I guess took advantage of his mom when he was just kind of riding through in his youth and tried to make amends, and now he's been rebuffed, and so uh, Balian gets a night to kind of like toss and turn about whether or not to take his absentee father up on the offer, and well, his brother's about to make that decision for him.
Yeah, well, I like he's basically trying to convince him to go along with it just so that he can get killed, right? It's like such bullshit. He's like, "Oh,
Ah,
you have your sins erased." It's like I didn't fucking sin, motherfucker. Because the idea is like basically because his wife committed suicide that like it's like he's sinned by association with her, which is like just a really terrible thing to say to someone.
and like Guy de Lusignan later in the film, like there are these figures that Balian, sidles up to that they just hate to be reminded of their own mediocrity, and so like that's kind of like at the core of their antagonism with Balian is that like they have no principles and they're just trying to advance themselves, and they just feel very uncomfortable when they're surrounded by this like when they are in the presence of a guy who like actually has some place that he's going and actually is playing a deeper game with all these these religious ideas and whatnot.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, the
Any
cross burns into his palm. Fuck
dude,
yeah.
any time in a movie when like there's a guy running around on fire, it's good. It always
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Every frame of painting in this film, really. I
Oh
mean,
my
it's
god.
yeah,
I mean, this is like this movie just it all looks exquisite. It's just one of Ridley's best looking movies, which is saying something. But man,
yeah.
you look at the way the forest is here. It's like this is unreal. How did he do this? Just the
Right. You brought
lighting
up
and the
Legend, right? And like, I mean, he's even incorporating things from Legend into
it's like
this,
a
not
more
just but yeah,
naturalistic version of Legend. It really is that. It's just you combine that with his more his like focus on location shooting and yeah. And oh man, I love this part where he meets up with the fucking the Band of Brothers guys.
yeah,
Man, it's just honestly, it's my favorite thing ever. I love because what I love about this movie is this movie contains like so many sub movies in it. It's like you get many movies for the price of one. It's episodic. It's like
yeah,
the fucking Canterbury Tales or whatever. Because you have this whole bit where he meets up with Liam Neeson, and I remember when I first watched this, I was like, oh okay, like he's gonna accompany these guys to the Holy Land. These guys are all like badasses, like because they look fucking tough and look like man, this is it's like Seven Samurai. It's like you got the fucking Expendables in medieval times over here. These
yeah,
are
and they just
tough
get owned
dudes,
immediately.
and they get absolutely destroyed. And you're like, holy! Like, I mean, it's such a great tone setter for your just like it will not save you. And Ridley in the commentary compares it to, he said he wanted to do, um, like his like Wild Bunch scene because he wanted to show that it's like it doesn't matter how good you are when death is like so instantaneous. Like your skill is almost it's not irrelevant, but it's like if you're surprised like they are in this scene, like you're at such a disadvantage.
Yeah,
And it really like goes to show you like all right, this is like a brutal world, and like like Balian, he's only able to survive because he has his smarts and he's able to plan and he's able to like use tactics and stuff, which we see later in the movie. So it's like you can't just like rock and be like, oh, I'm gonna like every sword fight is the fight that you cannot win.
Right. And we see in the scene just before this, there's the hospitaller is brushing his teeth. He's got this like elaborate kit that he uses with a little bit of like mint paste. And then there's an argument between the Saracen in the group and another one of the knights that he's peeing at the wrong position. I think he's like upriver from where everybody else is washing. And this movie is very like it's always making us aware of the context of the battles and kind of like the conditions and how that has an effect on who's going to prove victorious. It's so many of these types of movies, they're just completely divorced from like well, where
Well, it
how
shows you how people lived, right? Like William Monahan
yeah
talks about, he said a major thing was that he wanted to show that people who lived during the Middle Ages, like it wasn't like no one knew anything. Like they had their tactics. They had stuff like primitive toothpaste, because it's like they were as smart as us, right? They just were working with limited resources in that way.
Liam Neeson's got to teach sword fighting in as many movies as
He's so
possible.
good. Yeah, I mean, what I love about this is that it's like you actually learn about like a good way to hold a sword during this scene. Like I love movies where it shows you process, it shows you like an educational idea, and like we shows you like this is a form that you
Yeah.
can swing at. Like you don't like the blade is not like the only important part. Like you like the cross guard, like the handle you could also use to gouge someone's eyes with. Like it shows you that like these guys, they weren't working with like the most advanced things in the world, but they had an advanced understanding of how to use those things.
Mm. Oh, I love this little sequence. Ooh.
Yeah, like this is the ultimate Ridley thing where like you have this moment of beauty, this pure like little
Right.
flower, and then it gets like a guy gets fucking eviscerated with an arrow right
Yeah.
to his head. That's like Ridley's filmography in a nutshell, right?
Yeah. And now this, when I saw this, I felt like he was bringing some Black Hawk Down, like some of the like more experimental, kind of shutter speeds changes and stuff, like into the fight scene.
Yeah,
Because
where
this
you
has a
get
very jagged
like
quality.
slow
Yeah.
mo ramp up, like it's almost like proto Zack Snyder in a way, but much more like accelerated and frantic.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, I mean, I think one of my favorite action beats in this whole movie is when David Thewlis like runs and jumps onto a horse like as the horse is galloping past him, and there's this great moment where he's almost being like dragged sideways by the horse, like as he gets into firing into firing position.
What's also cool about this, like his band of boys, is that like they're all from like these different parts of the world, and it really shows you that it's like the Crusades wasn't like it wasn't this like thing of like, all right, like we're a bunch of white people like going over here to do whatever. Like it was this kind of event, right, where if you had nothing you could go there in an attempt to um like obtain a homestead, or like become a trader, or like the idea wasn't just to like go out and kill people. Like the idea was really like a form of colonization. And so here you have like all these different guys from different parts of like the world. And so it like what I like about this movie a lot is that it goes out of its way to complicate things that we would otherwise kind of be like, oh, that's like the stereotype and it just doesn't exist here. Oh my god, dude, this shit is so fucking quick. I like how he uses the technique that he just taught him right in the fight. He smashes the guy's throat with the hilt, right?
Yeah, yeah, I bet he's glad he just learned that.
I love that in movies where it's like you see a practice, and then you see the illustration of what that actually looks like.
Yeah. Oh, love this.
Dude, this shit's so brutal. This stuff is fucking rough.
Yeah, and I mean, when I just love the surprise of, like you mentioned, that this is the Dirty Dozen, this is the Wild Bunch of badasses, and
This is the most metal shit. The guy has an arrow in his
yeah,
throat, and he still runs at the dude.
yeah, I think we all missed this guy like for the rest of the film. Like, there's no shortage of there's just a murderer's row of character actors in this movie, but like I would have loved to see more of this guy.
Well, the movie has such a great cast that it's like you want to like. I just want this movie to be 5 hours long, and for us to get all this stuff with all of them. And you don't get that, but it's like you get these like really high impact moments with each of them.
Right. And well, this makes a great argument too for no, we can do it all in one movie. Like I think that because there's been so many fantastic miniseries and prestige TV productions within this genre, Game of Thrones, for example. Like we think that like narratively, there's just not you can't pack as much into like a feature film as you would want to. But Ridley, I think, succeeds at that.
Yeah, these
Canterbury
like
Tales. I like when you said
yeah, these
that.
like speed ramp shots.
Yeah.
God,
Oh man. Yeah. And this is yeah, proto Jamie Lannister just gets murked by
dude, this is like the blood in here, the squibs. It's so insane. You're like, what the like? God, I wish so many more movies had this shit because the violence is so uncompromising. There's no fucking around. It's like you get hit with a sword, like you're dead. Like it's so over. Like there's none of this like, oh, I take 1,000 punches and blah blah. Like you just no, you like it's again just really sense of like no holds barred. You're just getting ripped apart. Like, and again, we
yeah.
get this scene with like their eyes being closed. Like I love these little touches. This movie is full of just nothing but little touches, which unfortunately just were all like butchered and destroyed in the theatrical cut.
It's just amazing when like, this could happen to Ridley Scott. You could just get manhandled like this by the studios. Like, I mean, the best to ever do it. It's always a fight to make art in this system.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, it's so absurd too because it's like nowadays every fucking movie is, like 3 hours and whatever, 2 hours and 40 minutes. And, you just think like, what, people couldn't handle this back then? Like this true epic?
Oh, my
Also,
friend. Oh,
this shit is
sorry.
so great. This
Yeah.
he's like, oh, parlay, I'm a fancy nobleman. It's like, nah, you're gonna get dead. You're dying. It's happening. Like it's like with like the Lucerne hammer too. One of those brutal weapons where it's like on one hand, it's like a weapon that's designed specifically to pierce armor, and so he just like uses it just to fucking like pickaxe his head. It's just savage, man.
Yeah. It doesn't even take off the chainmail hoodie first.
No, because why would you?
Right
Right?
through.
It pierces through. Just
But yeah, my buddy, when he watched this, he said like a couple walked out of the movie after that last violent beat, and
what?
heart goes out to them. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
glad they didn't stick
they're not
around
gonna make
because
it.
yeah, that's just a taste.
Yeah, I always feel like sad about this stuff with Orlando Bloom and Liam Neeson because I always feel like fuck, like I want in a way it's like I just love like relationships like this in movies where it's
Yeah,
someone trying to like make up for something, and it's like I wish it's like, oh, if only they had a little more time where he could just be like he could like see like what his son becomes in a way, like it's tragic.
yeah. I mean, I love the just the implications of it. Like, there's just some things happen to Godfrey on the road that compelled him to want to find the son that he knew he had.
Well, because I think it's like he realizes like I spent my entire life like like being a fighter and I really cherished what I haven't like what I've been fighting for, right? I can imagine him coming back and it's like maybe this is like the one thing that I actually created in this world instead of destroyed.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, now I love Martin Sokas. I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of the villain of this piece.
Oh yeah. Yeah, really
Just
the only like truly like evil, deplorable scumbag guy.
yeah, but also like I mean, and with by virtue of the performance, and I get it's in the writing as well, but like just a man of his time who I mean, I think he knows better. Like we'll meet Brendan Gleeson's character a little bit later on, who's just kind of like um the butcher, of this crusade, and he's just kind of the hatchet man for Guy. Like Guy is, he's the brain behind it,
Yeah.
and then Gleason is the muscle.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of media where the Templars turn out to be like cool dudes. I think almost in every piece of media ever made, it's like no,
Is there really?
these guys were not good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, if you play the Assassin's Creed games, like they're the huge villains of all those games, like just like the worst guys ever.
as it should be, right? That's a pretty good burn. I love that he's like, all will be settled. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
this
even know how he
upcoming
did.
bit.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so much of these. It's like it again. You just take a still frame of all these. Like, look at this shot. Like this,
it's
the way
just
people are
incredible.
posed. I mean, it's Ridley is a painter. Like he's such a skilled composer, one of the best to ever do it. Like this stuff is unmatched. It just looks.
It
He
looked
just knows
dirty,
how to
like
be
convincingly. Yeah,
like how to frame this stuff in a way that it just looks visually dynamic and appealing.
it's a pretty good fit. And now here we get the title of the movie.
That's right. I said this before in other commentaries. Anytime a movie says the title of the movie in the movie, it's the best.
Mhm.
Like every movie should do it. I really truly think this. Like if a movie doesn't say this, and if they have like dialogue and a character doesn't say the title, you're wasting your time. Like why do it? Why why have
Right.
this drama?
And I just think it's very beautiful and very true that the way that Balian exercises this principle that he's discussing with his dad is not in winning the city, it's in the way that he loses. It's in the people
Exactly,
that he saves.
exactly, exactly. It's not about like, oh, I overcame like all obstacles. It's about knowing like what's valuable, and he only fights in this movie to protect people.
Right. It's yeah, it's the dignity of the dispossessed. Also, a little bit of context. This was made, in the early days of the War on Terror. The Bush's War of Christendom. Um, Very deliberately, I think, Ridley wanted, he wanted to tell an old story that had been a monkey on his back for a little while, but then he also wanted to speak, I think, to modern context.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what I mean when you read reviews about this movie at the time, all of them basically are critical of like I mean they're all basically reactionary. Like they're all like, "Oh, this is a political Afghanistan war movie, anti-Iraq war." Like they all took the reactionary position of like,
Yeah, the
well,
most boring critics of all time.
how dare you show like like Muslims in a good light? How dare you do this? Like just the most fucking like monkey headed stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I just thought this was so beautiful and moving at the time, like because yeah, there were so. I mean, it was a time when like the otherization post 9/11 of Muslim people was at its
Yeah, well, I like
zenith.
how even then we get like that little comment where he's like, "It's proper to praise God," and then like he's looking at them praying on the beach, and he's like, "It sounds like our prayers," because it's
Mm.
like it's true. It's like these like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all come from the same source, the same area of the world, and so it's like ultimately it's like I think because they have so much in common, I think people focus on the differences so much, and they're just like, oh well, this is that. It's like really there's so much ignorance surrounding these different cultures that like you realize like so many wars and so many things of like destruction and hatred have been made out of the smallest bits of this and that. And I like how later in the movie you have Saladin like where he sees the cross that is like fallen over and he puts it back up,
Oh,
and
love that part.
it's like yeah, of course, it's like like the I think because it makes total sense for it's like if you're a Muslim, it's you don't want to see holy symbols desecrated. I think it's it's such a smart and generous portrayal of different cultures. And I think if anyone but Ridley had really handled this subject, and like Monahan too, if they had like, because you could easily make a Crusades movie. It's like, just blood and guts, and we're just gonna rock 'em, sock 'em, and the the Saracens are bad guys, and blah, whatever. And you're just like, the world doesn't need more of those. What they need is a movie like this, where it's a movie that does feature like a lot of death and violence and conflict, and deals with the political realities of the subject, but it's also not like trying to say then, oh, those realities are permissible and they're good and they're right. It's very much engaging in questioning them and question them in a way that makes sense at the time.
100%.
Now
And
this scene is so important to me. That this
yeah,
bit where he gives them like the chivalric oath. Like I made a poster for this movie where I put his words here on the poster.
I
I
love that.
just
Yeah, that was great. I love that poster you made.
yeah, this stuff to me. I mean, I'm just obsessed with like people who live by codes of honor and
Hmm.
like have this internal sense of values. And chivalry is like such a complicated thing, but I think like what this scene gets at here is it's so pure because it's like the last thing that he gives his son, like literally with like we can't
Hmm.
even stand up with his like dying words. He's just like, all right, I'm going to give you the only thing that's ever really mattered in my life is just this idea of like trying to live a righteous existence, even in a world that has all this violence in it.
Right, and also Godfrey's sense that like this is it's a falling world, or it's a fallen or falling world, and maybe through my son we can reclaim this oath. Maybe if I vest him with this, he can do a better job of it than I was able to.
Exactly.
And I mean, even
See,
when he's
all
on
this
his
like he
last
says
legs,
like
yeah,
he's like, "Are you sorry for?" He's like, "I'm sorry for all my sins except for one." It's like that's kind of like keys into what that idea was earlier. Like this idea
yeah.
of like it's like fuck, like I've only done one good thing in my life, which is have this son. So like I just have to go out on that. Like otherwise, like it's all for naught.
So here is the end of the chapter, the kind of like I don't know what we would call this chapter. I guess like the origin story of Balian before
Well, it's
he
yeah,
yeah.
it's like the pre, it's like getting ready to embark on the main quest of the movie, which is like the management and the siege.
Yeah, it's odd, but there's a moment, one of my favorite moments in the movie is when it's very simple, but like Balian just kind of like it's when he's already set up at Godfrey's estate, and then he walks out in his finery, and then Hospitaller David Thewlis is just standing there, and it's the first time they've seen each other since the storm. And I don't know, I love in movies when like the old friends who've been kind of like
It never not
yeah,
works, right? It's
yeah.
always good. It's always cool. Also,
Can
I
you
like how the
imagine?
scene
Yeah.
really shows you like what sucks in the Middle Ages is traveling by boat. It's
Seems
terrifying.
like, oh God, yeah, just constant vomiting.
Yeah, frankly, you're never gonna catch me doing this shit. I'm well, first I'm never gonna be in the Middle Ages, but also like I'm never gonna go on a fucking sailboat.
Yeah, I'd rather take the Oregon Trail. Thank you very much.
But when he wakes up here, it's almost again like there's echoes of like Pirates of the Caribbean, right? It's like Robinson
Yeah.
Crusoe. I've ended up on this wretched shore, and I don't know where I am, and like, yeah, like when you look at like all the fucking dead people that surround him, it's like, yeah, it's a fucking miracle that you're still standing, my man.
I love the Wretched Shore. That'd be a good title for something.
Yeah, that's the name of my new album, Wretched Shore.
And to your point earlier about Pirates of the Caribbean and or Orlando Bloom's supposed lack of juice as a leading man, if they can't all be Jack Sparrow, right?
Well, but the thing is, if you had more than one in that movie, like it wouldn't be special. Like Jack Sparrow only works because Orlando Bloom's character in that movie is able to bounce off of him and to be like the straight man, to be like, oh man, like what's this? It only works because you have a relationship that goes into that. And I love the playfulness where it's like you have this guy who's like, I'm very honest and I want to fight for love and I care about things. And like you have Jack Sparrow's like, man, I just want to fucking live and get drunk. Like it's like,
Do you have
but
any
that only
rom?
works if you have both parts.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. We were just watching The Postman about a guy who kind of accidents his way towards a revolution, and that movie is about like a 1/100th of the power of this film, but that fake it till you make it mentality I'm a sucker for it. I love that Balian just kind of he just
Yeah,
takes
he
he's
just stumbles into it.
wanders. Yeah, yeah. And we're about to meet Alexander Siddig's character. He's one of my favorite all-time character
Now, now,
actors.
yeah, he's so incredible in this movie. And what I also love is that, like, this whole scene when I first watched it, I was like, oh, and it plays such a great trick on you, where it plays on the perspective of like, it's like, yeah, of course, I'm gonna send my fucking assistant to pretend to be something like really important. Like, it's so smart. It's such a like amazing way to stage the scene.
It's like a fable. I mean, or it just doesn't it feel
It
like a
does.
little
It
short? Yeah.
it does. It feels like a fairy tale from like the Arabian Nights or something, where like my my valet gets to pretend to be me for a day, and that way I remain safe. Like, it's just it's there's something like very poetic about it, and like that's when I talked about like the movie having these episodic things. Like, this is like an episodic short story within the movie.
And we're gonna see him put those Liam Neeson sword skills to good use again.
Yeah, every time he fights this movie, he always does like he has his stance. You know.
A high guard. What is it? What do they call it? The Eye of the Hawk.
Yeah,
Very
I think
cool.
so.
And I love the way he's able to disarm this guy. Oh, he just did, right? He disarms that guy's spear. I like
Yeah,
to
like this thing where
imagine.
like his buddy gets a little bit too into the role.
Yeah, yeah, no, I like to imagine that like these Muslim characters, they're just out kind of adventuring, having a bit of fun. And it's like in this
Yeah.
situation they fucked up, right? Like they're just kind of like trying to have some fun at this
But
yeah.
yeah, you could see it's like yeah, he definitely didn't plan on the idea of like his valet getting murked.
Right, but in the end it works out for everybody, right? Because it's fortuitous these two meeting each other. And exactly, why not be merciful?
Yeah, because like I just stumbled into this place. Like the first thing I'm gonna do is like like kill the first two people I see. It's like no.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I could stand to learn a few things about this strange
Yeah.
new land. Now, the way that the digital effects are used in this, I think, is exactly right.
Oh, I
Like when
mean,
they need,
it's
yeah,
what's so great is that it really hasn't aged at all. Like, it still looks basically like flawless to me. Like, there's not really a part in this where I'm like, you know, and I normally don't say that about most digital effects, but especially this, it's so seamlessly blended in with the real production design. But yeah, you look at a lot of this imagery, and like this is very similar to like the first Assassin's Creed game. Like when you walk into one of the cities, this is what it looks and feels like. It has the same like, color tint.
man, I have to play that. I have not played
You would
any of
like
them.
it. Yeah, the first
Yeah.
one's really good. Yeah, see, this is almost like yeah, it's like Ridley doing. He's like, all right, I'm going to stage the gladiator shot again. You know, the one where he first walks into Rome.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You see like the huge arches. Like that's kind of what we get here.
I mean, as like a setting for a film, I mean, the idea of this city is it's traded hands, in the past, and it's already on top of a bunch of layers of sediment, and I've been a slave or near to one. Yes, you have, sir.
Yeah, I also like this where it's like, like he earns his respect.
Yeah, which is like it just cuts against. I mean, some of the other characters in the film where they just take it as a given.
But
You
so you
know,
just
like
have
they don't.
assumed responsibility, where he's the only one who actually feels like I don't want this responsibility, but I have to like live up to it in whatever way that I feel is best. And
Mm.
what I also like about this opening bit is that it shows you that even though the Crusaders have like occupied this city and technically control it, like the city of Jerusalem is still like it's like a very cosmopolitan place. You have all these different people from different religions, and they all have to exist in here, no matter who is the political like military top dog, right?
Right,
And
and that has to do with Baldwin the king, right? Is that that's his mandate? Is like, no, this is has to be a place where everybody can pray and
yeah,
live
because it's a
live.
place
Yeah.
for like that's central to all three faiths, and so it's like why like it's impossible to disentangle it from any of them, right? So you might as well just respect it. It reminds me a lot of how people talk about Alexandria in the ancient world in antiquity, where you have it's like, oh, you got the Christians and you got the Jews and you got the Gnostics and you got the Hermetics and you got the pagans, and they're all interacting and talking in this one city and like sharing ideas and creating new things. And like honestly, it's like that's the best possible environment I can imagine for like it's like, all right, we can actually have discourse. You have a Neoplatonist, and and he could talk with the Gnostics and try to understand what's going on here. And like I don't know, it's like at its best, I feel that's what human culture can provide, is where you have difference without like conflict or hatred, right? Where you can understand that like there are different paths for every person, and insist on like, despite these differences, we all have something to say to each other.
I love the little reflective moment that Balian just had where he goes and he
Yeah,
buries the cross and he says, "How can you be in hell when you're still in my heart?" A little bit of that, almost like Malachian
yeah, it is a little bit
introspection.
of
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I mean, I can't honestly, I can't even imagine like what it must have been like back then. It's like you're in Europe, right? You hear about Jerusalem, like at most you've read about it, but it's like he's probably heard about this place for all his life, and it's like you get here and you're like, holy shit, like I'm actually in the place, right? It's kind of you know, it's like when you're at the grave of your favorite author, you're like, wow, like this is here, right?
Right, and his past life was like as provincial, or was like, he probably knew everybody by name. Now he's in the presence of like a million people, maybe, or more than a million.
Well, because it's like you get to where Christ was, but it's like this is not really, the same place that existed 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's become something different and mutated.
Yeah, and see, and it's funny. I always associate that actor, the bald actor there, with Snatch. He plays like he's the guy who says, Frankie fucking Four Fingers has a diamond the size of a fist.
Oh, is that him? Holy shit!
Yeah, but see, this is the first the next big twist of fate that Balian has is now he's got a posse and he's got a huge estate with servants and stuff.
See that this is also a thing that I feel like the Assassin's Creed games like crib off of, like the idea
Oh,
of
do
like
they?
having and managing an estate. It's kind of fun. Like, yeah, it becomes like a mini game in those games where you have to like manage things and you can like build new places, and it's kind of fun.
Well, if you're gonna steal, steal from the best.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? Oh, okay, can I share with you something lovely?
Sure. Aw,
That's the sound of a beautiful creature.
aw, that's lovely. My one of my cats, Lulu, just came up to me and checked in, but she's I think she's just 4 months old, so she's got
Yeah, for
a lot of
for
yeah,
everyone
she's busy.
listening, that was my cat Spook. He's a big
Aw,
boy.
that's
I had to lift him up.
I have one of those floofy cats too, named Herman. Like he's like a snow leopard. He's just giant.
That's a good name.
Yeah, it's named after my late uncle. Here's the part I was telling you about with the Hospitaller.
Yes, that's right. See, I like this scene too. It's like really, he's always focusing on like the texture of a tapestry or a drape or a tarp or some part of the physical environment. It's such a lived sense of where you feel like here's this place, all these different artifacts, and it's like this person wove this, and the production design is so exquisite. It feels so, it's like real and it's vivid and it's everything that you fucking want. I mean, like
Oh yeah,
the way that Eva Green is presented here with this like amazing outfit, like holy shit, like
yeah.
what she wears here, it's like what, like she just looks like she comes out of a dream.
She's so sexy in this movie, and I love. I mean, and you were talking about the little details that Ridley hones in on. Her greyhounds, the dogs, as like a forerunner for her, and they're like a completely alien element that just springs into the scene before we even see her. And yeah, I mean, she just done Casino Royale, I believe, or this it was around this time.
This is
And
before that.
oh, before that, okay. Post The Dreamers, though.
Yeah, can I just say like her performance as Sibylla in this movie and um was it like Vesper in Casino Royale?
Yeah.
Like, why isn't Eva Green like the best, most popular actress in human history?
Well,
She's
she's my
so
favorite.
good. She's so good in these. And like, what the fuck happened? Like,
Well,
why
she's
isn't
Tim
she in
Burton's
anything
muse now.
anymore? Is she? Oh, I know
Yeah.
she's in, yeah, Miss Peregrine's or whatever. Fuck. I mean, I guess that's fine. But like, it's like Eva Green should have been like a top tier, like ScarJo tier talent. She's just I like between this and Casino Royale, I'm just it's like it's she's one of those actresses who makes such a commanding presence and has like it just sticks in your mind forever. Like the way that she dies in Casino Royale, you're like, fuck, like you're
Yeah.
never gonna forget that.
No, she's one of the best to ever do it. And this is the next to the scene between Balian and Godfrey. Um, Holiness is here and here. It's in right action. By what you decide to do every day,
Yeah.
you'll be a good man.
Yeah, it's like kind of like almost like a it's like what Christianity inherited from the Stoics and Aristotle. It's it's like every day you have to like renew the vow and the desire to behave rightly. Like it's not about like okay, I do one thing and I'm redeemed. It's like
Yeah,
it's
very 12 steps.
redemption is a practice.
Yeah,
It's a progress.
it's a practice. Now this is where we see a bit of now. Okay, now is the our intro to the court of Baldwin
Yeah,
the
we get the
Fourth, I
politics
believe.
stuff, which Ridley loves. He
Yeah.
always loves these scenes of like court. There's several scenes like this in many of his movies where you get to like the I see. Look, you get the scene too where like the Templars are hanged.
Hmm. And now, see, that's how you know a movie's going to be good is when they're like, "Oh yeah, and Jeremy Irons too is here."
Oh my
You
god,
haven't even
Jeremy
met him yet.
Irons. He as Tiberius. What a
Yeah,
great fucking name for this character,
with the big
Tiberius.
scar across his eye. Yeah, that's
Jeremy
how you
Irons
do it.
is perfect in this. I mean, this cast is just goaded, but fuck, like I'm sorry, like anyone listening, it's just me gushing, but truly, like this is one of my favorite movies ever. I can't express my admiration enough, and it just feels like you get every single thing works. The cast works, the cinematography works, the score is amazing. Just it all comes together.
And this scene in particular is interesting because we have there's a dispute between a merchant and this horrible Templar played by Brendan Gleeson, and there's a little bit of dialogue added towards the end that I think is unique to the Roadshow that was not in the theatrical cut, where the marshal here, Jeremy Irons, would like to assign some security to these Muslim caravans, but there's a little bit of resistance on the Muslim side to like mixing with these people, and there's just baked into the political situation here is like a yeah, just a resistance to like working together, living together.
Yeah, because it's like he has the thing. It's like I would hang you alongside, your troops, but you're protected by your title. Like there's this hard thing where it's like these Templars are coming in and like running roughshod over everything. It's like you're trying to maintain the peace. These guys are doing it, but you can't fuck them over because also like in the advent of a siege, right? These are the only men at arms who are going to like like be there, right? So it's this trying to navigate a sense of justice in a place where you have it's a multipolar world and you're trying to exercise a unilateral idea of like what is right. So
Mm.
it's like I can't protect the caravans unless you're going to be guarded by soldiers, but you don't want to be guarded by soldiers because these guys might pillage what your caravans are carrying, and so it's a catch-22.
Now we're about to be introduced to Edward Norton's King, He's uncredited. This is kind of like with Gary Oldman and Hannibal, like like a big star playing like a heavily made up, like
Well,
kind of a
I mean,
juicy little part. Yeah,
Edward Norton and Gary Oldman are kind of the same type of guy. They just love these roles. They love like just put all the prosthetics on me and I'll just
yeah.
cook.
Well, I love it too. I mean, I love just that notion of like there's this magnetic presence, but like you can't really put a face to a name until yeah the credits,
See,
I guess.
I love what Tiberius is talking about here, where he says like is like all these fanatics are coming in from Europe to like fight a war, right? But it's like only us who have been here realize it's like, no, you don't want to do that. Like you want to hold on to what you have. Like there's no point in trying to fight here because we just don't have the capacity to actually like do anything. And all you guys trying to agitate for war, like you don't know what you're getting into.
Right. Wouldn't it be nice to have a functioning state instead? Is their idea.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like it's a very melancholy moment towards the end when Tiberius just books it. Like I think his
Yeah, because even he's
character,
like,
yeah,
fuck it. Like I can't do
right.
anything. It's over.
Yeah, he's like the world-weary cop who just
Well, it's like
rides
he
off
has
and shows
the
you.
understanding, but he doesn't have the will to continue on. He's been here too long. He's just burnt out.
Now, Guy's like attitude towards his marriage and his wife, it's like that's just the first signal that this guy's a piece of shit. Is like he's married to Eva Green and he just has the gall to to be such a pouty little baby about
Right?
it.
Okay, like yeah, just first of all, like being married to Eva Green, like what the fuck? Like
Yes, please.
it's like okay, I'm just married to an angel. I guess that happens.
But I love his performance. It's like you sitting at my table. And in the director's roadshow version, he's you just get more of his patheticness. Like you get just a little bit. There's a little bit more dimension to it. Like I think that, like with many of the characters and storylines, it was really done a disservice by like cutting so much out of it for the initial theatrical presentation.
Well, it's like he's totally debauched here, right? He's just like everyone hates me, and I know it, and I'm reveling in the fact that I'm hated because I can get away with it because of my title.
Yeah, he's not like existing in this place. He's not open to the possibilities. He's just like
Yeah, he's just here being like, I'm here. Here's what I want to do, and it's gonna get done. And like, I don't give a shit about anything otherwise.
yeah. I mean, he just has his entitlement has just kind of blinded him to like just all the potential here.
Oh, I love these scenes lit by torchlight. They're so
Yeah.
beautiful. You just get this like fluttering of light on people's faces.
And like as with every scene in this movie, like you just look at there's a whole story in Evergreen's costume, like because she's a French monarch, right? But who's like she's incorporated like a lot of the culture and the textures of like of Jerusalem.
Yeah, and there's later
Yeah,
that I think that she does like she's having like henna tattoos like done on her hands and things like
yeah,
that. And so it's very much like where like Guy is just like, all right, I'm here for Christendom and really for myself. And like because he's like never there to actually like be around his wife is like, well, I'm here, like I might as well like become a part of what's actually happening here, which is like a society which is not just like a bunch of Christian European fanatics coming in. Like there's like so much more going on. It's like if you actually want to have this make any sense, you have to like broaden your horizons. And I also imagine like even if you're a part of royalty coming from Europe, like encountering things like like Arabic teachers and all these different like types of philosophers who exist here. It's like, yeah, that's going to change your mind because you're just going to be like, oh wait, like there's this and there's that and there's all these things.
just a wonderful character. This king,
Oh
he
yeah,
gets a lot to do,
so evocative.
and I suppose in the story, in the context of the story, he's like in his mid-20s or something, and he's been
Yeah,
ruling for yeah, and he learned of his leprosy when he was very young, but he was kind of a wunderkind and like studied at the knee of not only the characters that we've met so far, but I believe with Saladin, right? Or his association with Saladin has spanned years, and they are kind of like, in addition to being, I mean, they're antagonists to one another, but they're also each other's teachers.
Well, yeah, you could see a point in history where it's like we didn't have to engage with this, and it's like circumstances are forcing us to do otherwise.
And I mean, I think that like our rosiest ideas of leadership are that like they would be they would seek these conversations out. They would be amenable to kind of like, well, let's incorporate the perspective of somebody of a class far beneath my own, who has had some on the ground perspective.
Well, also because it's like when you're out here, like it's like the class distinctions really stop mattering because it's like, all right, like who can I actually rely on? Like this, like the idea of merit becomes much more important.
Yeah, I mean, well, at least to somebody who's not an idiot.
Yeah, and this like discussion of games about like being a man who moves yourself.
And and just this is Monahan's writing, but it's
It's really slick. Like it's so like it's really intelligent stuff.
right, because the callback later is that when he asked Balian to do some cloak and dagger shit, Balian has to cite the thing that you yourself told me earlier, which is that like, look, I am alone and the steward of my soul, and this is wrong, and
Yeah, and no one can
come what may.
ask me to do anything else.
But I gotta say though, I side with the king on that one later on. Like I think it probably would have been best if he had sullied himself a little bit. But
Well, the thing is, it's like yes, like he's right, but it's also like he did not create the circumstance in which that rightness would take place. It's like he himself would be wrong in that
yeah,
rightness,
no, I
and
mean absolutely, yeah,
I think it's just like it's one of those things where it's like it's the impossibilities of moral action in an immoral universe where it's like how do you actually act in a way that resolves all circumstances? And the answer is that you can't.
yep,
And that if you try to assume responsibility for what everyone else does all the time, like you're going to get nowhere. And so, when he talks about here, it's like like your soul has to be accountable to you and you alone. Like you have to evaluate what that's going to look like. And it's like at the end of the day, it's like it's an unfortunate reality, but you do have to face that. If you try to make up for everyone else's sins, really, you're just going to sully yourself and essentially destroy everything that you care about.
hmm.
Also, I
Now,
love this little implication here of her son, which like her son is like just totally non-existent in the theatrical cut.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
what?
this was completely taken out of the cut that most people saw.
Yeah, see, like these scenes in the darkness reminds me of Tyrell's bedroom in Blade Runner.
Yeah,
Same color palette, same like use of like the flickering.
no, I love, I mean, how thoroughly Ridley storyboards his work, and he like creates this vast sandbox to play in, but then he's just so specific about the way that he covers it and the kind of point of view moving through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in that he's not like Tony, where like Tony would just shoot miles and miles and miles of coverage and just, select it all from the editing. Like he knew what he
Yeah,
wanted to do, but he just covered it from every single conceivable way that he could. He had like fucking like 15 fucking cameras for every setup. And you're just, it's like it's an intense method. Whereas Ridley, like when you hear him talk, he's like, it's like, yeah, I have like 3 cameras at the most, and I just know what I want, and so I get it, and we do it, and we shoot real quick, and because I already have it in my head, it's all storyboarded, like we already know what we're doing, and so I think in a way, his films feel much more like um, tightly constructed than his brothers, but they still have a sense of spontaneity and power to them that I think he lets incident into them, but he's never like veering far away from his own idea of like what constitutes beauty.
right, and of course in like the perpetual Ridley Tony online wars,
Yes,
some
the wars which will never end.
right. Some people say that Ridley's boring, or he's like, is austere a word that they would use? Like he's just, like his formal tendencies are just like not as interesting, I
Yeah.
guess,
Well,
which I
so
disagree with.
I
But
want to point out like we got the medieval like dance macabre written on the wall here.
oh, yeah, I'm sure.
The
Yeah, you must
yeah, the
love
dance
that.
of death. Yeah, I love that stuff. It's pure Gothica. Um, yeah, with the Ridley versus Tony thing, I mean, look, it's like Ridley. I think he's been much more praised, right? Like his movies have won Academy Awards. They're more respected. He plays with a bigger palette. He knows what he does. Whereas like Tony never really stopped doing one particular thing. I think he achieved a much more like a narrower mastery, but like a mastery nonetheless. And so I think it's just judging between two different kinds of artists. You have Ridley, who's outside of like musicals and westerns, has basically made every single kind of movie, right? He's
Mhm.
done it all. He's um, more of like a William Wyler or like a Howard Hawks type, not in style, but just in like he touches everything, right? He has a whole bunch of different
Yeah.
interests. He cares about painting and music, and he's an aesthete who has like a wide ranging intellectual uh, understanding of what film can be and what film can draw from. And so I think that can strike some people as a little bit like cold or like whatever. And then Tony's much more emotional. He cares about thrillers where there's a lot of high stakes, a lot of opportunities to innovate stylistically on exciting topics like gunplay and submarines and jet fighters, right? He makes movies about things that are inherently exciting. And so it's like ultimately I love both of them. Like Ridley's my guy. I will never like not say that I prefer him, but it's there's no wrong answer really. It's just depending on what your personality is. Now this scene, I love this scene so much. This whole bit where he like irrigates the estate, it's so great because it shows that like it's like this movie isn't just about like epic fights and politics and all this. Like
Yeah, it's
really
about
takes the
building it up.
time. It's like there's like a like to talk about Howard Hawks again. It reminds me of like Hatari, where you have these scenes where it's just people living life and like trying to you know like in a John Ford way, where it's like, okay, we're just gonna do this thing. We'll have like a celebration, or we'll make this. We'll construct a village. Like them constructing this whole system here. You see bit by bit, like how an irrigation system is made and how a place like the Middle East, it's not just like a fucking desert. People live here. There's ways to get water. There's ways to grow things. Like it's it deconstructs that static idea of what the Middle East is, and it shows you that like no, this is like a place where life can flourish, and it's more than eminently possible, and that like honestly it's it's better off for everyone. Like when you have stuff like this, it's like Billion's a smart guy, and so instead of just being like, well, I'm here to kill people, he's like, no, I'm here to be a good knight. And like like a good knight is like a well-rounded person. It's kind of like a prototypical idea of a Renaissance man, right? It's that he's a skilled fighter. He knows how to make machines of war, but he also knows how to apply scientific principles to agriculture, because it's like he has to, because it's what he can do in Europe. And he's just being like, all right, like where can you find water in a desert? Well, it's underground. And so he's able to apply this, and kind of how uh, his dad just let the estate kind of fall into neglect because he was too busy fighting all the time. And Billion's able to come in and say like, well, what he's able to transform the environment, and almost like the way that a magician does, where you look at like what can be, and then you're able to transform what is into that possibility. And I just love that scene so much because I think a lot of people take it as like, oh man, he's the first person to invent like irrigation or whatever. And I don't think that's true. Like
No, that
it's
wasn't my
much
read of it. Yeah.
I think it's much more about like him like essentially like showing that it's like I'm not just here to like be a conqueror or to participate in some kind of machine. Like there are things that can be done here where it's like, okay, like if I have to, like take on these responsibilities, like responsibility is also about giving back. It's not just about like lording over. And we see
Right.
later
And
that like the whole place, grows and it's all green and stuff. And so even when he leaves, even when Jerusalem gets conquered, it's like, well, he did grow something here. He left a lasting impact that wasn't just based in bloodshed.
yeah, I mean, his practice, his kind of like his philosophy of holiness, it goes and out into each individual action or each little kind of it's 100 things stacked up to form, yeah, his outlook. I always think about like to make a movie like this is the assembly of like 100,000 little units. And when it's somebody like Ridley at the helm, it's just it's a bunch of little perfect strokes that just add up into this like incredible tapestry. And it's yeah, I mean like movies are magic. I mean these types of movies like really do feel like magic acts because of just the Herculean effort it must have taken to assemble it. And this could only I mean he could only make this after he made Alien and Blade Runner and Gladiator. It's all of them
Yeah,
synthesized.
it's almost as if like he takes his command of the fantasy worlds and the sci-fi worlds, right? And then he transforms in like, what if we brought that attention to detail to a historical movie? Yeah,
Oh, this little bit, yeah.
when you have this bit with Sibyl here, I like how you have the like the contrast between like their ways of life, where like she sees that he's also an outsider, and that she can be like, all right, like here's a guy that like actually doesn't have all the bullshit that everyone here already has, like the hopelessness, the despair, the kind of the conflict, and like she's basically like kind of become this like multicultural like almost like half decadent figure where she's just like, all right, like nothing's really going to get solved here, so I'm just gonna like sit around and enjoy as much of it as I can. And like when she's talking to him, it's like, yeah, the commandments aren't for people like us, right? And she's kind of like, like all this is basically bullshit, and so why bother with any of it? Like why like pretend and
Yeah.
have the pretension of this? Whereas I think Billion's philosophy is like, precisely because it's like being devalued, like is a more reason to like try and stick by it, because it's not just about like us.
Yeah, I mean her appeal to hedonism is very persuasive. And I think that's the idea of it, right? Is that like he sees an opportunity here, like, man, I could just like live high in the hog with this queen and I mean, that's definitely a road I could take, but because of his past experiences, he's gotta choose a little bit of a higher path.
Yeah, I love this thing where she's like he pays enough attention where he's like, yeah, I've met your son. And also where she talks about the difference between like Christianity and Islam. And she has this kind of like this biased perspective where she's like, oh, like, they submit to God, but Christ says you have to make a choice. But then Balian, responds to that. It's like, well, did you choose your husband? And she's
Mm.
like, well, no, it was chosen for me. And so it kind of like she still has like this kind of this like a little bit holier than thou perspective on what's going on here. And I like that he's like, it's like, yeah, but you realize that like, we can talk about superiority and hypocrisy and stuff, but it also like equally applies to us, and that like you're not outside the frame, and that perhaps like a choice made with the absence of power is not really much a choice at all.
Yeah, yeah, and she's got a wonderful arc, I think, because of course, in the closing chapters of the movie, or not even in the closing chapters, but in the third act, she decides to kind of like abandon her position to throw in
Yeah, I
with
mean, it's like that. I mean, with a lot of like the real life like decadent literary authors and poets, like their choice is either like, all right, well, I either have to like submit to an absolute sense of morality such as Catholicism, or I have to fucking commit suicide. And a lot of them ended up choosing either of those paths. And it's kind of like, yeah, when you devote yourself to just like pleasure and experiencing things in the moment, it's like when that moment passes, what are you left with? It's you're constantly chasing a high that never quite gets as high as the last one. Because like with Bailey, it's like he's like, here, right, I'm gonna stay and fight. And she's like, well, like what's the point? Like, well, why does it even matter, right? Like her thing is like, I want to move on to the next thing, let's go. And he's like, no, this is worth fighting for. And she can't understand that really. And it's like she gives up on her and her son, and it's a tragic thing because you can see what she's doing is out of almost like a corrupted sense of compassion. And it's hard to judge her for the choices that she makes with her son because, it's almost like she would rather him not live a life than to live a life with suffering because she's that devoted to, these like aesthetic pleasures. And it's like,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just such insanity, the political climate um, here, there, as in here. And for her to have seen what her brother went through
how to
in his
say what that,
ascendancy to the
that,
throne and not wanting her son to literally, I mean, just to have the leprosy, but then to also be at the center of this, like, yeah, this insane religious tug of war.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where if you don't have the will to stick by something, then like any broach of it is like intolerable, and you can't
Mm.
really get past that. It's a it's a difficult prospect to face for anyone.
You can tell that, like, when they landed on that line, when Monahan wrote that, between us, there's only light. That's just such a banger of a,
Oh yeah, it
no
fucking
pun
rules.
intended, for a intro to this love scene.
Also, like, this is really talked about. Man, Orlando Bloom is fucking like
Jacked.
he's jacked in this movie.
Well, you kind of have to
I can't
be.
remember a part of Pirates of the Caribbean where like he takes off his shirt. Maybe there is a scene, but it's like I love how Ridley's just like, now we're getting that. It's happening.
Well, I mean, with I remember around this time was when Brad Pitt did Troy, and to do these like these extensive like sword fighting scenes. I mean, it's not even it is vanity muscle to an extent. I mean, it's movies, but like, to be able to lift a sword and to be able to like do these long days of whacking people, you got to be kind of jacked for that. So now we get a little bit of these
Brendan
psycho.
Gleeson is like, he's one of like cinema's greatest. Like, just his voice. I'm like, fuck, I hate you. Like, I know he's like probably like a nice guy in real life, but like
Oh, sweetheart.
when you hear him perform in movies, it's like this fucker. Like,
His character in this is so great because like he's very purple. He's very like
yeah.
over the top and exuberant.
Look at
Yeah.
these shot. Look at this shot. This is a painting. Like, this is like a
My favorite.
romantic era painting.
I mean, we're about to get it, but there's this shot of like the camera's the blood just shoots up in his face and he's just like in an orgasmic ecstasy from massacring these Muslims.
Yeah, because and you see like earlier he points out it's like, oh my god, the guy getting sliced in half. Holy
Yeah.
shit, I
And
forgot
just
about that.
his bug eyes, just like, oh my God, it's so
Absolute
good.
insanity. Yeah, it's like you have he like points out it's like, oh, the caravans have like soldiers with them now, and it's like yeah, like those those could have been like, the soldiers of Jerusalem if it wasn't for you fucks, right? It's like their actions, they know what they're doing. They want it to be like,
Yeah, they had yellow cake uranium. That's why they got
oh
attacked.
that's right, that's right. How can we forget? Yeah, and I like this scene, like she is like, even in like this like presence of like love, it's like she finds like, she looks on the wall and like the figures of death are there, and it's a specter that haunts over her character. And like here when she's focusing on like all the different rings, it's like, she has all these, memento moris of, a life that she feels that she's lived, but she talks about, it's like, yeah, I've never been here, like I'm just trying to reach out to all these different things and hope that the accumulation of them will, provide me with something meaningful.
And even just the set dressing, like there was that brief shot of like the pomegranate on the platter, and it didn't look like some kind of plastic concoction. Like it looked like it'd been sitting out in
Yeah.
the hot desert air for a little while. Like
Well, it's
yeah.
funny. You watch The Duelist. There's a lot of stuff in that. There's like a scene where it's like a still life, like a painting that it has fruit and stuff. Like Ridley, he knows how to add those textures because he's so attentive towards the way that light, will hit a thing of fruit. Right? He's like, nothing escapes him. Really, he's always like, the details have to matter if the whole is to matter.
Hmm. And now we see there was a shot of a kind of steady cam shot coming up to the back of the king's chair, which we see repeated as different different rulers sit at that chair, and this is kind of like the squabbling ground where you got the Templars on one side, and then you get the King's guys on the other side, and they're always on the precipice of just killing everyone.
Yeah, and I have this like it's like the circular logic where it's like, well, you know, like an army of Christ cannot be beaten, so that's why we must fight. And it's like if an army of Christ can't be defeated, that would be a great reason to never fight at all, right? And that's like to me, it's like kind of like a part of the point of like a lot of Christian morality is like it's like no, you don't fight because by not fighting, like that's the way that you win. Like you're not like
Yeah,
you don't defeat some like there's no you don't actually defeat your opponent by shoving a sword in their face. Like you defeat them by making them a friend, right? You defeat what they stand for by becoming something and helping them realize something about themselves that makes them not in opposition to you.
right. And Saladin, we learn later. I mean, he very much wants the city, and but he's very practical about it. And we see the jockeying by some of the men on his side, uh, somewhat analogous to this, where they feel like the god's on their side, and they should be able to just charge in and take it. But he's as a tactician, a soldier, he's got to know where he's close to water. He's got to be conscious of the numbers.
Yeah, and so
It's
I
yeah,
like how this movie really emphasizes it's like it's not like the thing that leads to destruction is just like the blind insistence on virtue and like assumed virtue, and it's by people who like ignore the actual like practical necessities of being virtuous, right? That it's not about like, oh, we can just run roughshod over whatever. Like it's like if you actually believe in this, like every single action like must be considered within that light, and you cannot take it like any of it for granted, really. And like yeah, with stuff with Saladin, yeah, you make a great point. I love that bit too because it's like it showed like because I think now you would have gotten like almost like a tokenized version of that scene where it's like, oh, it turns out that that all the Saracens are like, oh, they're cool dudes and whatever. It's like it shows, yeah, a plurality there where you realize like, oh no, like the opposing factions are as complex as each other, right?
yeah,
There's not just this one like type of person. It's very much like no, there are different attitudes, and it's only through like one person's will and insistence on like the right kind of action that any action that is righteous happens at all. Like you can't abstract one person insisting on the right thing as opposed to just being like, okay, well, it's just going to happen anyway. Like no, it's like you have to account for the presence of individuals, and you can't run away from that. And I think a lot of this movie is about like it's like, oh well, I believe in this, so I'm going to take an action which is abandoning whatever. And like Balian and Saladin are the only few who are like, nope, I have to, if I'm going to act like this and I'm going to believe in this, I have to stand with the consequences too. It's not just you can't just behave you can't use what your beliefs are as a way to ease your way away from the world, right? Almost in the way that
right,
Sibylla does, where it's like, well, I don't care about anything except for my son. And it's like, well, when your son dies, like, what do you have? Like, you have to have faith in something else,
mm,
like anything else, right? You have to, have a purpose that's not just tied to something that's ephemeral. And so, when the Crusaders come in, it's like, well, our faith is really, it's not in Christ, it's in conquest. We want to, just do whatever we want and, conquer shit and, you know, take over stuff. And it's like, well, when you can't do that, you have no purpose, and, and you're just going to die on the battlefield ignominiously.
yeah. And this is one of several moments where Balian is just completely outnumbered. I
Yeah,
mean,
because he's like, even in a fight that he doesn't like really believe in, he's like, well, I have to like do something. Like this is literally like, it's the fact that he's even able to be like, I will like, I will throw myself, you know, at the beginning of the raid, right? Like Like
Yeah,
the
he's
people
probably
who,
gonna get smoked. Yeah.
because I didn't cause this stuff, but it's like I will behave in a responsible fashion towards it. And like most people wouldn't do that shit. Most people would be like, well, it's inconvenient for me. Oh, I'll not bother. And
Right, but
you
that's
know,
how if it's about if you're trying to get to the kingdom of heaven, then this is what it means. You've got to be willing to die.
yeah, exactly.
That little moment where he kisses his sword.
It's so
Did you catch
good.
that?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
They put that in one of the trailers, which I thought was a great
Oh,
choice.
did they? Nice. So you saw this when it came out, right?
Yeah.
So, like, what did you think about it at the time? Like, what was the marketing like? Because I wasn't really conscious of it. I was too young.
Well, I was 13 when Gladiator came out, and it changed my life, or it changed my, like, I mean, it just kind of reminded me of, in my best version of myself, I would be involved with making things like this at some point. And so Kingdom of Heaven was a few years later. It was my first or second year in college, and the theatrical cut is like good, but it's just a shadow of like
Like
the
at the time, were
director's
you
cut.
like, I
Yeah.
wanted more? Was that your reaction?
Yeah, yeah. I just felt like there just wasn't, because there were just fragments of the characters and like the themes. It
Did you
was
feel
all
at the
just,
time where you were like, is something missing here? Was that something that you were conscious of?
well, see, I didn't know, like, I wasn't aware of the whole story of like that. No, there was actually, the script was much longer, and they just filmed all this stuff, and it was like, and it was kind of like Ridley's magnum opus, at the time, or that in its completed form, that's what he was driving at. And I didn't catch that from the theatrical version. I just thought it
Yeah.
was like more one of his more kind of like, yeah, abbreviated, misbegotten, but visually spectacular projects.
Yeah. Oh my God. Some of the stuff here, like
Yeah, you said
the
Snyder, yeah, the when he uses the slow motion. um
yeah, it is. I wonder because Snyder, I don't know. I never hear him talk about Ridley a lot, but like some of the stuff must have been influenced because Snyder comes from commercials and music videos, right? Same thing as Ridley. Like
yeah,
there's easily like a thing where I can imagine that being the case.
but I mean, yeah, Snyder's clearly more interested in gods, and Ridley's more interested in mortals.
Yeah, well, Ridley always like Snyder cares about like you know like the weight of the world like being on like one man and like the burden of this kind of like objectivist idea of morality or whether to behave like an asshole and that kind of stuff. And like Ridley's never been about that. Ridley is always like assumed a kind of like a fallen world that is only the only sense that is made of it is either by righteous people or evil people. And he doesn't really judge either way. Like he often has both of them. Like when you watch The Counselor, you're like, oh yeah, this world is controlled by demonic forces.
Yeah, yeah, that movie is. I need to rewatch that.
See, this
That
bit is
was a
so good
crazy
when the
movie.
shine of the sword gets in his eye, and he's like, that was my
Yeah,
servant. It's such a great moment because it's like it shows you how he's like like Balian's exercise of virtue is what leads him and the rest of the survivors as being like the only ones to just like survive this encounter at
yeah.
all,
It's
right?
it all connects. It's all connected.
It's
The
only because
littlest
it's like
action.
he
Yeah,
behaved right in that one instance, and it shows you that like, it's like this stuff, it has consequences beyond just the immediate. It's like by acting in a way that he didn't know would be beneficial for him later. It's like he didn't know this at the time, right? And so by being able to do that, it's like he becomes the only person who's able to like save all these other lives. And because he also like he doesn't instantly like judge and like
mm.
condemn like a land that he just enters into. And
Right.
because
He's
he
not just
doesn't
a.
do that, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
he's
go
not
ahead.
imposing his values on everything from the jump.
And he assumes the best, right? Like he doesn't assume because I think a lot of people, it's like this realistic attitude, quote unquote, gets assumed as like, oh, well, everything is shit, and so I'm just going to act based on that. And that's like, actually, that's really no way to make things good.
Hmm.
Like that just makes everything worse. Now this scene
Yeah.
with the fucking army, insane. These shots, like with the cross coming up and like the telephoto lens just compressing all these people into a huge mass. I mean, like it's fucking like Kurosawa stuff, like this whole movie is like Ridley doing a whole lot of Akira Kurosawa esque compositions and ways of moving the camera and kind of the epic scale and tone between like dynasties and you just because it's like Gladiator has a lot of this great stuff and it's about like one man's story. What I like about this movie is that it's like one man's story, but his story is also like the crux point of like these two entire civilizations. You just get
Yeah.
this, you get an individual intimate scope and you get the huge epic scope as well.
The intro of Saladin here is wow. And I just like the way he looks on the horse too. He brought this actor back for I'm trying to remember the films that he's well that terrible movie Body of Lies, which we won't speak of.
Yeah, the actor Ghassan Massoud. He was in
Yes.
All the Money in the World in Exodus.
Yeah, yeah, but this meeting between the heads of state is just spectacular. Including the part my favorite part's always when Saladin says that he'll send over his physicians to because he's aware of um, how precarious the leper's ride
Because
must have been
he
out
because he
here. Yeah,
respects them and he's like, listen, man, like I'm going to like try and give you whatever I can help in your dying days. You know, it almost reminds me of that scene from Last of the Mohicans where like those two generals, it's like we're on opposite sides, but we can still have decorum, we can still respect each other despite our different values and our different positions.
yeah, and why not, right?
Yeah, that yeah, this scene, yeah, right. Like the way that Solid is like it's like his like scarf blowing in the wind and the sun behind him. It's just beautiful. Like truly it is I gotta keep saying this over and over, but it's so painterly.
Yeah,
I'm obsessed with that shit. Like really just pulls it off every single fucking time. Just never stops hitting the mark on him.
yeah, and Saladin, like just in a few quick moments, I mean, he could do anything that he would assign one of his men to do. That's what he like affects to
Yeah,
me.
well, you see that like this is a man who's not only sorry, this is a man who's not only like command of these like this huge army, right? He's not only powerful physically, but he's powerful mentally. He's powerful like he has a personal power, which is he's got a command over himself, and like I think so much this movie is about it's like we're supposed to kill each other, but we have to find a way to not do that, and
Yeah,
that's real life. It's like fucking I really think like yeah for the vast majority of the human species like the last thing anyone will want to do is to kill like another person like it's just like our natural reaction to it is disgust and it's only through repetition that it becomes like some kind of like weird psychopathic obsession.
yeah, it's institutionalized now, and this is the king doing the work himself, and like even though he can barely stand, he recognizes that he must be the one who whips this asshole in the face because yeah, I mean, he's just trying to hold on. This situation is rapidly decaying, but he's doing everything he can to keep the peace.
Yeah, and I like this thing of like I'm not going to like like we're going to make terms with Saladin, but you fucking I'm gonna like literally whip you with my fucking cane. Like
One of my favorite acting moments from Gleason is when he just like hungrily grabs the chicken
oh
from
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he starts
I
eating
forgot about that. That stuff rules, dude. I love when actors just like blah, 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 they go crazy.
it. Yeah.
I think there's like an art towards eating well on camera. It's not just eating, you have to like relish it.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Tarantino's talked about how focused he is on the food. The food as being like a medium of communication, across his movies.
Yes. You know what? That's a good point because think about like the coffee and Hateful Eight, the burger from Pulp Fiction,
Yeah,
obviously.
the screwdrivers and Jackie Brown or Edward Norton.
Yeah, usually I'm not a huge fan of him, but man, he's just excellent in this role. Because I think ultimately it's just like it's a total like pure performance. Like there's no ego in the performance. Like he's playing something that's very reticent and very withdrawn, and yet he's so powerful in the movie.
It would be, I mean, yeah, I guess like on a Ridley Scott movie, you won't really get too far if you're if your ego is trying to outpace his.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that's why he probably never worked with Harrison Ford again. No, but see, this is like such a perfect place for the intermission. Like, what
Yeah.
better? Like, it's like you have this like prelude to the battle. You know, like, oh, some shit's gonna happen. It's going down, and then you have the
And the last
intermission.
Yeah, the last shot was, I believe, before the intermission is Guy's like, he's just glares, right? Like up towards the camera. That's it's like that's the ellipses is like, oh, what's this guy gonna do now?
Man, now the music that plays here for the intermission, it's such a perfect piece. It's so haunting. It's just like it leaves you with such like a wistful sense of like, oh man, I don't want this fight to happen. And then like the drums start coming in, and you're just like, fuck, like it's happening. Like you have to
Yeah.
batten down the hatches basically because some shit's about to go down.
A long time ago, my dad, he was insistent that when I saw Lawrence of Arabia, we had to see it in 70 millimeter. So we went to the ArcLight Cinerama Dome and we
Your
watched
dad
it.
was very
And
right.
yeah, and I mean, I think like Ridley is just one of the many contemporary, big time directors who they saw Lawrence of Arabia when they were young and it
Oh
knocked them
yeah,
on
I
their
mean,
ass. And
well, he
they're,
always
yeah,
talks. It's like who are his inspirations? It's fucking Kubrick, Kurosawa, and David Lean. Like Ridley from his very beginning. I mean, when you watch his first movie, he makes an epic film with like no budget, right? He's always been wanting to do this. All of his films, in a way, have an epic feel. Even Thelma and Louise, which is a very intimate story, like they're going across America on a road trip. He's always interested in the panorama. He's always interested in these huge ensembles. And again, he's one of the few modern guys like David Lean, like Kurosawa, like Kubrick, who can just pull it off and have this excellent panache. And not only all that, but then always be trying to have something to say in his stories and to really like make something that's not only resonant for the time, but that could be resonant for all times.
yeah. I
Like
mean,
a
trying
film
to
like
make the
this is built
Sistine,
to last, right?
yeah. I mean, trying to make the Sistine Chapel of movies. He's always about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I know a lot of people have different opinions about him, but look, Alien, Blade Runner, this movie, like, and you can insert, whichever other ones you want, but like at least these three, I like. How can you? I mean, he's made three, I think, really perfect movies. Like, I don't toss around like the idea of perfection lightly. Like, I think he's just done it, and whatever you want to say about his other work, like it's hard to deny the craft that's on display. Like just being the guy who's made these movies affords him a lot of license, I think, in any judgment.
Right on.
Saying like this now, we start with Saladin's camp, right? We see the different side of what just happened.
Right, and everybody's pissed at him for not going for the jugular. And I love it because, like, as Saladin explains, this wasn't just about his bleeding heart. This was about like he read the terrain and he knew that like this was not the ideal time for us to rush in, or that was the call that he made.
Yeah, because you had the huge like army that just showed up, with the huge band, the huge cross. It's like, okay,
But as Alexander Siddig reminds him, is that like, look, there's you have an imperative to win this city, and that you cannot ignore that. That must be satisfied.
I love this bit. It's like, how many battles did you win before I came? It's like, and then he says, before God determined that I should come. And like,
Yeah,
I like him like couching himself as being like, it's like, yes, God presides over all things, but like,
I,
there's still the matter of the fact that, you know, like I am who I am and I can accomplish victories, but they have to be accomplished in the way that I deem correctly. And if you want to do that without me, then go ahead. But you're not going to get very far.
I'm gonna start saying this to people. Thank you for your visit. when I want to abruptly end a conversation or like a Twitter thread. Such a great face.
Oh my god! Well, it's like he's got a very like very chiseled cheeks. He's
Hmm.
very statuesque.
I still haven't seen All the Money in the World. I'm kind of morbidly curious about it.
It's a good movie. I think it's underrated.
Yeah.
Although
And I
I'm a
was gonna
deranged Ridley head, so take that for what you will.
well, I was gonna say just briefly that it's not one of his best, Exodus, Gods and Kings. Like almost nobody likes it, but he does attempt. Like there's some of the stuff you were mentioning about the well. We he does that some of that stuff again in Exodus, and they're the better parts of the movie.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that. I want to rewatch the unrated whatever cut. I want to see how much of a difference that makes because yeah, that's a movie where like there's good parts to it. It's got some unfortunate things, but yeah, it's not devoid of merit totally.
Mm.
Although honestly, it's funny. Like, I mean, with like William Monahan making this script, I think this is one of Ridley's movies where he has more of a respect for the you know the notion of like religious faith, whereas I think in some of his other movies, he you know, I mean the
It's not as nuanced. Yeah.
well, not even as not as nuanced, but just he very much embodies his own perspective, and he's just like I mean, when you watch Prometheus, right? Like Prometheus is essentially like a film made by like a hardcore like secular atheist who's like, yeah, like like God doesn't really exist, and the God that you think exists is an asshole, right? It's almost like this like double pounded like if God did exist, he's not worth worshiping. Like this, like even like a quasi Gnostic worldview,
So
which
like
I don't.
Ridley is like David, basically.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean,
David the android. I mean, yeah.
you know what I would say? Ridley's filmography. This is something I want to write about someday. His filmography is full of these complicated father figures, right? When you think about like when you think about Tyrell, when you think about yeah, like David, even when you think about like you know like Liam Neeson in this movie, um, or the King, or um, what is it? I'm trying to think of the other ones, like in Gladiator when you have like
Marcus
you know,
Aurelius. Yeah.
yeah, when you have him, he's like all these regrets. Even in All the Money in the World, the whole movie is about like a father who just like has a very complicated relationship to his family, and I think Ridley keeps returning to this notion of like what does it mean to actually create something? What does it mean to preside over something? You know, as a father, as a creator, like what responsibilities do you have towards the world and towards what you've made, and you know what happens when you abdicate those responsibilities? And this is something that he's always just uh, had a complex like thematic exploration of.
I was just thinking of like Roy Batty and Tyrell and Blade Runner. That relationship is off an awful lot like Commodus and Marcus Aurelius in Gladiator, down to like the ways that the son kills the father.
Yeah,
Or
no,
yeah, yeah.
definitely. And yeah, you think about yeah, like the stuff in Prometheus where it's like, you know, you meet the father of the species which created you, right? You meet your dad's dad and he just rips your fucking head off like cuz he's just disgusted by your existence. Like there's something like Ridley's always engaged with this idea like a creator and a creation's like the fact that that relationship is either it's too complicated to deal with or it's something that's so complicated that it's like the result is estrangement and alienation and detachment. And I don't know what that really says about him. Like I don't
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
his
nobody
relationship
no
is to his kids or whatever, but
right.
it's a theme that he's interested in.
Yeah, nobody actually knows what happened to Ridley Scott's dad. He was never heard from again.
Yeah. It turns out his dad was one of the engineers. So
Yeah, not a lot of people know this. This is breaking news on this commentary track only.
that's right. That's right. Ridley Scott's dad is a big, bald, white, black-eyed alien man.
Yeah.
Oh God! One of these days, I'm going to have to do a commentary for Prometheus on this channel. I know I will. Inevitably, it's going to happen, and I don't know. I perhaps I need to reevaluate that film in some ways, but yeah,
Well,
it's a fraught text. I'll just say that right now.
yeah. Well, the debate that it inspired, I thought across the spectrum, very interesting. Like I don't know, I
It's a film of
appreciate.
interesting ideas, you
Yeah,
know, no matter what.
Yeah, I love this part where we get a real sense of their marriage, which is just like, no, you're persona non grata. We're married, but only where people can see us. You know,
Yeah.
who knows what this guy did to her? You know, I
Well,
mean,
and I
we
love
can.
this like subtle bit of mise en scène where you have the dividing line of the curtain between them.
Hmm.
See, look at this. You have the contrast of like the curtain in the corner, then you got the shaft of light from the window. I mean, Ridley's one of the true masters of just like how to light people. Like the lighting in his movies is never ever ever bad. It always looks just perfect. And yeah, I mean, it's because his technique is so refined that I think a lot of people like feel like, oh, it's Ridley just doing what he
He's
does,
just
and it's like
coasting. Yeah.
he's just coasting, and I'm like, isn't it? Don't we want auteurs to like have a distinct vision of the world? Isn't that what we want? It's like it's like how people criticize Wes Anderson. It's like, oh, he's just doing his aesthetic again. It's like, well, but that's what he does, though. Like, how could how can he not be who he is?
Yeah. Um, okay, so here is the fulcrum of the story, which is
Yes.
they're going to make this last stab. You know, the good king's going to make one last stab to hold this all together, and Balin will not go along. And so, because he does not go along, um, the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, and see, it's almost like these like the king and Tiberius, they're following like in like esoteric like tarot terms. Like these guys are following the path of the sword, right? Like they're trying to use intellectual discernment to solve the situation. They're saying, well, if we did this, if we move this piece, and if you married so and so, then whatever, right? Like it's like when Billion says, it's like a king can move a man, right? But a soul belongs to that man alone. So he's rebuffing this intellectual idea of solving this crisis by saying, well, I can only respond with my own emotional, you know, uh, my own emotional principles, really. And so he almost represents like the tarot suit of the cups, right?
Mm,
He's resolved to his own things, even if they aren't as like tangible, right? Say as like a marriage. He's like, I can. I'm not just here to be a part of this situation. Like I'm here to to be a knight, and that does not imply it's like yes I will like serve you because there's a righteousness towards that, but I cannot ask to be compromised in a way that would compromise me. And it's like not about self-righteousness as much as just being like really at the end of the day, like even if he did do all this right, even if he did uh marry Sibella, you're just like, well, he'd just be prolonging what's going on, right?
right.
It would just be
The
another
same thing would
cycle of
happen
bloodshed.
again.
It's
Yeah.
like, as cruel as it sounds, like there just had to be a breaking point with what's going on here.
Right. And when does that breaking point need to happen, and how long can you pass the buck before, yeah, eventually?
Exactly. Because I think despite trying to maintain the peace here, there's an inherent conflict that it's like one day, it has to be resolved. And, over the course of the Crusades, it eventually was resolved, where it was like, yeah, you guys shouldn't be here. You should probably go. And it was only after like, what, like 6 Crusades and, millions of people dead that we were able to figure that out. That's the thing, right? It's like an individual person can provide a solution, but like to solve a problem for a civilization, it's it's like you have to repeat the mistakes over and over and over again. And even then, ultimately, like those lessons will be forgotten because it's not about like an individual's ethical choice. It's more about the fallibility of history and censorship and memory. Like the Crusades happen, and then you have the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the whole fucking bullshit happens over again. And you're like,
Yeah.
haven't we learned, guys? Like maybe just don't invade places. Like maybe this is not a good idea. maybe we should leave people the fuck alone. Like, because it's like instead of like hunting terrorists, it's like we're going to like destroy the country that those people live in. It's like what kind of sense does that make, right? Like you're, but of
Yeah.
course, though, we're trying to think about that kind of thing logically, right? But at the end of the day, that's not really what they care about. They don't care about logic. They care about, well, I can make money off of this. I can get this or that done. Right? It's all about exploiting a circumstance. Oh my god,
Yeah, the
he's
language.
eating the chicken here.
Yeah, it's the rotisserie at Vaughn's, delicious.
It's like a chicken you would eat in like a video game, you know? Like also I
Right.
love how like he doesn't know if it's poisoned or not.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I was gonna say the language of conquest. You know, it's just like I want the thing, I want to take the thing. So let's just figure out what the vernacular is to kind of like sell that
Yeah,
to the
and I
people
also
we need
think
it. Yeah.
for the church at the time of the Crusades, I think so much of this was is that they gave permission for all these people, including nobles, right, to essentially expand what they didn't have in Europe, right? It's like, okay, well, you don't have this here, you don't have power, go take it somewhere else, right? But what really that's doing is saying, okay, instead of like potentially having you guys revolt against us, right? Like revolt against the power of the church and the powers of, kings and whatever, instead of doing that, we're just going to, again, like you said, pass the buck and have you vent your aggression somewhere else.
Now here is like the most notable excision from the theatrical cut, and it's this what happens to the heir to the throne. It's like a brief, it's like it's not a brief vignette, but it's like I don't know, like I'll never be receptive to the argument that like that sequences like this don't belong in the larger picture because
I mean, no,
it's
they very much do.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not always like, especially filmmaking of this caliber. Like, why do we need to be in such a hurry to get someplace?
Well, exactly. It's like, again, I think people, it's like when a fucking superhero blockbuster can be like 2 hours and 40 minutes. Like, we can't do that for a historical period piece, Like, no, it, it deserves it even more so. In fact, I never ever mind any long movies. I don't. I don't begrudge them anything. And for like the way that people do that to me is baffling because again, you'll like we talked about this with the Postman. You'll binge however many seasons of a TV show, but you won't watch a 3 hour movie. It's
Hmm.
absurd. And I like this just like this juxtaposition that it really does, where you have the dying of the king, just as the son discovers that he has leprosy, with the by like not being hurt by the fire, and it's like it's such a great like poetic thing of like even as this thing is passing, it's still almost like the curse of this lives on.
Yeah, I'm not as good with like the subtext, but I mean, like, what do you think? There's any? Is the leprosy supposed to be like a symbol for something?
Um, like in the context of the movie, I
Oh
think it
yeah, well,
symbolizes
yeah.
like the fact that it's like goodness itself is subject to decay, right?
Mm.
And that the king here can be a righteous man in unrighteous times, right? But at the end of the day, like the one person is not enough, right? Like it like he needs to. I mean, the reason why he's drawn to Balian is like he realizes there needs to be virtue that exists beyond me, and like I can only provide it by putting you in a position to succeed. And it's like the
Yeah,
decay of
to
it
do the
is,
things that he cannot. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's also like I think it's tied into the Christian uh aspect of the movie where it's he dies, but it's like Jerusalem still gets to exist and it doesn't get destroyed, right? It's because ultimately all he wants is like, all right, I just don't want this whole place to be burned to the ground. Like that's the last thing that I want. Like whatever happens, just don't do that. And he dies, but in essence, his spirit is able to, his will is able to be accomplished by the conversations and the then what he imparts to Balian.
This storyline with Sibylla's son, it also gives her more agency in the story. Like this is kind of like the leg of the film where she gets to kind of
What's her tragedy?
move yeah, move the needle as far as to like what occurs at the in the back third of the movie.
Now this music piece that plays in here, this is
From
the
Hannibal.
yeah the opera piece from Hannibal, which I didn't observe before I listened to the commentary. And when I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, of course. And like, it's so funny because like in Hannibal, it's used in the most perverted context possible. But when done
Right.
here,
I
it's,
love them. Yeah.
it's wonderful, right? It's like, really great. But like, I mean, it just shows you that like Ridley is like a stealthily perverse filmmaker in some ways. He'll use stuff in reconfigured ways where you're like, okay, like what? Like he's it reminds me of like what Kubrick does, where he'll, play these classical composers in with images that kind of juxtapose the emotions away from what those those compositions are intended to do, right?
Yeah.
He'll play Wagner when it's like, this is not really like it's almost like a parody of a Wagnerian scene, and like that sense of humor. I don't think Ridley's not a filmmaker who has a ton of humor in his movies, but I think he's kind of got like a dry English, ironic sense of, it's like this is like a fun little gag that I can enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, I highly recommend his interview on WTF podcast. The way that he talks
Oh.
about his body of work, he just he loves them. He loves all of his movies. He thinks they're all bangers to him, which I appreciate.
even a Black Rain, which is great.
I still haven't seen that actually. Looking forward to it.
Oh, you would love that. Oh, come on.
Is that Michael Douglas, right? Like fights
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Yakuza with Andy Garcia, right?
Pat, you would love that movie. You got to see a Black Rain. It's also like a beautiful movie, like truly, like
It seems badass, yeah.
The great Jan de Bont shot it. Cinematographer, just it looks perfect. Like it's stunning.
Oh no, I need to ask. I did not do my homework. It was Darius Wolski the DP for this.
No, this is before him and Ridley started working together. Let me see who did the cinematography.
Yeah, I should know after all this time, but yeah, the music in this.
This was shot by John Matheson, who shot stuff like he shot Gladiator, Hannibal, Kingdom of Heaven, Robin Hood, Matchstick Men.
Very cool.
So he shot a lot of Ridley stuff before and after. He also shot The Man from U.N.C.L.E., X-Men First Class, and how could we forget K-Pax, which is a great movie. But yeah, he's obviously a skill guy.
This is another great, just wonderful writing moment where Balian's in his like angry teenager mode, and talking about the burning bush, and doubt, like this is like his deepest moments of doubt, but then the second bush catches fire seemingly
that's right,
out of magic. I was gonna say the music in this movie. I'm guessing because of like the fraught post production, he uses music from the 13th Warrior towards the end of the film, and he uses a piece of music from Blade 2 even.
Really? What piece is that?
There's a piece of music from Blade 2 when Nomak, the Reaper, like the final boss, gets defeated. This kind of like tragic, like the tragic monster dying music.
That's crazy. And you know what? I would have never, man, huh?
But it works perfect. I mean, like I'm just guessing because he didn't have enough time to write new stuff, and he just needed to find something.
You know what though? I do wonder about that though. I sometimes Ridley like reminds me a little bit of Michael Mann, where he's like very finicky with scores and soundtracks to his movies, and he'll often have a composer come up with a complete score and then just junk that score. Like, I don't know if Ridley's ever done that for one of his, but I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of, exerts a fairly heavy hand when it comes to the music in his movies, and it was like, oh, you know what? Let's just put the Hannibal piece here. Let's put this Blade 2 piece here. I mean, I wonder, because I think he works like intimately with his composers, but I think he's like also, he's obviously like a very demanding artist.
Yeah, it's got to be heartbreaking. I mean, just imagine like working on this film and writing this music, and then it just it gets completely shelved.
See, this is a great bit from Monahan, where it's like during the precise like it's like when the boy becomes a regent is exactly when you're like, oh, but this will not last. Like he's doomed. Essentially, there's all these great like contradictory poetic touches.
Hmm. They didn't have iPads back then, so they had to use puppets.
Yeah, and on this scene where she's just watching from behind as he's being tested for leprosy, and you just realize, like, I mean, like her sadness as like he doesn't see her, but she's just like watching everything almost like in this capacity. And you see also that it's Saladin's doctors who are doing this, right? That
Yeah.
like they're testing. It's such a powerful moment.
It's yeah, I mean, this is just it's never not heartbreaking,
Yeah.
which I
Also,
figure, yeah.
Ava Green in this has like like peak mid 2000s like post goth like Evanescence makeup. You know what I mean? Like she looks so beautiful, but it's like very it's like a certain look. You know, I wish honestly I miss it. I wish we
Yeah,
had more of
I
this.
mean, yeah, she does it for
It's like
me.
it's a very
Must
heavy
admit.
eyeshadow, very heavy
Yeah.
eyeliner.
Jeremy Irons has so many moments in this movie where it's like, I don't know, just like a facial expression is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, see, it's like she says like the exact line where it's like, yeah, I think this place, like this world is not effectively worth it without my son.
Hmm.
And you know, it's like heartbreaking for you, but it's in those moments where you realize that like for anyone listening, I would just say this, like I think it's important like to have like a system of god damn it, my cat is fucking around. To have a system of like belief in whatever, right? Belief in virtue, belief in God, belief in, you know, in like whatever's important to you. It's not important just as like a whatever thing that, oh, it's like an intellectual exercise. To me, the reason that kind of stuff is important is because it's like when your life goes to shit, when like an apocalyptic event happens to you, when, you know, like a loved one dies or like a pet or I don't know, just anything, right? Like when something that happens that could genuinely like set you on a different path. I think a lot of it is important to it's important to like have as like almost like a bedrock, right? Where it's like it provides a context for something, and so even when everything else seems meaningless, you know, you still have a sense that okay, but there's something else, right? And whatever that is, right? Like I'm not saying that like everyone has to believe in, you know, one specific thing or this or that, but I just like from my own experience, I think it helps a lot for people when they feel lost. It helps them like kind of find their way back to, you know, actually living a life instead of, you know, maybe feeling despair and abandoning it.
Yeah.
Now this whole bit with like
Man.
Ridley spinning the camera, that's like something from the Duelists. He doesn't usually do it. He's bringing up his old technique. Um, and this whole bit, he in the commentary he describes as like this is my like spaghetti western scene.
Well, I mean, I gotta say, like, yeah, this is like the action movie fanatic in me. Like, I just love how ridiculous this is. Like, he's unarmed, like he has a rock, and he like defeats a
Dude,
mounted
it's
guy, and
awesome, right?
yeah, I
Because it's
mean,
like what actually like impacts someone in armor? It's like yeah, like a bludgeon weapon. You
oh
know,
yeah,
you
just this
can
little shard of clay just stabs the guy with it. Yeah, it's great.
because I like this. It shows you like a dude in armor is not like invincible. It's like you hit certain points, right? It's like yeah, you step on his neck, right? It's over.
Yeah,
You put pressure on a certain way. It's you know you're not invincible.
I mean, yeah, in the director's cut, just the juxtaposition of the most heartrending, or my opinion, that very sad scene where she euthanizes her son, and then this like Steven Seagal, like
Well, I don't even think. I think it's just like it's him fighting for his life, like his right to be
yeah,
like, all right, do I actually care about this enough to,
that's a good
you know,
point.
push myself past like my own sadness and you know, I think them kind of like offering this challenge to him. He's just like, all right, well, you know what, like I'm not going to get anywhere. Like, what, like, because like these people, it's like if they still think that I'm a threat, then maybe I can actually do some good, right?
Ah, well, man, you've convinced me. And I just love Martin Sokas's reading of the line right here. It was like,
Give me a war,
yeah, the
dude.
way he says
Dude,
that.
honestly, again, it's like how to tell someone is a bad guy 101. Give me a war.
I'm I'm 1,000% convinced that there are people like that are just super villains. They'll
I
just
mean,
say
look,
shit like that. Yeah.
not to date this podcast, but we just heard about these fucking studio executives,
Yeah,
with the
David
writer's strike.
Zaslav, yeah, Lit
They'll
by
just be
Candlelight.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, he's just being like, yeah, I drive them out of their homes and apartments. It's like, okay, all
Yeah.
right, we're just being evil now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, this is also why like Tiberius is just like, yeah, fuck this, I'm gonna leave because this is this is just stupid. Like the one guy who shouldn't be a king is here.
Now, okay, is he supposed to have god powers? Like I've always wondered about this scene where he just touches him and
I don't think so. I think it's just like he's probably just unconscious,
yeah.
and like the human touch can bring you back.
I love this line, I am what I am, someone has to be.
See, this is such like bullshit justification. Like this is like the justification of every tyrant in history. It's like, well, I just gotta kill people. Like it's like, no, you
Well,
absolutely
but
don't. You absolutely do not.
yes, but I do believe that even guys like this, I believe that they, I mean, and who should give it, why should we give a shit? You know what I mean? They're monsters. But like, I think, the human spirit, like, you reach a point where like, maybe you just get maxed out. Like maybe at a certain point, he's just like,
Yeah.
wow,
Look at this.
this is
This
how
is
far
very
it's gotten.
gladiator esque. Like it's like a little bit Malachi.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I mean, thankfully they don't show what he does to her. There's just that moment where he rips off, her veil, which is just perfect shorthand just for like, the brutality of what he's doing.
Well, I like that she's like framed by all this grass, and then like his face is just like splattered with blood.
Yeah, and that's Saladin's sister. I mean,
Hmm.
like the beyond the pale what he does. So yeah, now we're coming up on the back of the throne, but it's this guy.
Yeah, we get a repeated context.
I also appreciate the sense of now that this guy is ruling, like he doesn't have any sense or interest of like. I mean, it's all conquest. Like that. Those are the only terms he thinks
Well, yeah,
in.
it's just like this
Yeah,
is like the stupidest fucking thing. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, like again, this is like ultimate like movie villain stuff where it's like, oh, what do I do to the guy who shows up in like for the guy who's like willing to talk with me? It's like, oh, I would just fucking straight up murk him. Although I will say though, like, like if you have a genuine enemy and you just are like, all right, I'm just gonna send you the head of your messenger, you're like, okay, right? Like that's it's certainly a potent image.
Yeah, let's not beat around the bush. Let's just let's streamline this, please.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, that streamline it goes both ways, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, see, one change in the director's roadshow that I actually don't prefer is the final image in the theatrical cut of Guy is when he's being humiliated. They strap him on a horse in the middle of the battle, and they ride him out in front of the enemy lines. Just they strip him basically and put him on his horse, and they put like I think a dunce cap on him. Whereas in the roadshow, there's like this huge sword fight between him and Balian after the battle. That just kind of to me it's like an exclamation mark. After all the important business has been transacted, that I don't think they really needed.
Yeah, I guess.
It's cool though. I'll give it that.
And I mentioned like the stuff with the tarot with cups, right? You know, that's more true than I really thought at the time because it's like Balian is associated with water, right? Like he irrigates the water. He's very much like he comes out of the bath, right? He gets lost in the storm, right, in the ocean, and here he's like, it's like if you want to protect this city, like you cannot like move away from bodies of water, right? And with the Tarot Suit of Cups, right, like the element associated with that is with water.
Interesting.
Yeah, see, it's like these like all these Christian guys, like what they're asking for instead of like heavenly glory is earthly glory, right? It's like, oh well, I'll make my name and my mark by just killing a bunch of people, and like that's what's gonna matter. And it's like, dude, that is that is not what Christianity is about at all. Like that's exactly the opposite.
Right, and you just gotta love like Balian riding out there to discuss tactics, and Guy, he's bringing up the prerogatives of like of glory, right? You had yours, and now is the time for mine. It's like, well, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
We need to not call him Guy. We'll just call him Guy.
A guy, yeah.
Just dead name him.
How's it going, guy? Are there any modern French people named Guy? There must be, right?
I'm not sure. I have one friend named Surreal.
Really?
CYR. Yeah, it's a
Wow. Huh.
great name. It's like all death is certain. Love that line.
Well, that's such a beautiful line. I'll tell your father what I've seen you become.
Mm.
That's a really wonderful line. Yeah, see, in just any kind of narrative, when you have this like tragic sense of like oblivion, it's like he's like, yeah, I know I'm gonna die, but it's also like this is this is what I'm here to do, right? It's like fucking there's a sense of like almost like a happy fatalism to that.
She's listening to The Cure.
Yeah, which album she's listening to pornography.
Yeah. Now there's a little moment coming up with the army where a guy pours his canteen over his chainmail and it sizzles. I just love the heavy lifting that does just for selling the yeah, this part right here.
See, it's such an unfortunate bit. He's like, save the people from what I've done. Like, and he's
Yeah.
just like, well, like he immediately understands the situation. Yeah, fuck. Look at these people. Look at these guys. Like, again, we just instantly get the like, yeah, yeah. Where's your fucking water, man? Thirsty. Yeah, I never really thought about the water symbolism in this before, but it's definitely true. It's definitely like associated with Balian as a character and like
Yeah.
kind of his like he's alive like the forces of like emotional growth and development, and like he's having to bring that to a place which is just hostile to that idea.
Right. Water's everything in the desert.
That's right. Man, some of these army scenes are so fucking huge. I just think like, how does Ridley do this? Like the way he stages it. I mean, a lot of the Kurosawa stuff you see here, where you have all the banners, and he'll often just like not shoot the soldiers, but he'll just have everyone holding up the banners, and it just makes things feel so much bigger when you have like, because it's not only you're not only getting horizontal space but vertical space with the pikes and the banners and the flags, and like you just have the frame filled with all of this, and so you're not just taken up with the amount of people, but you're almost like what the people stand for, right? The various flags
Yeah.
that's accompanying it too. It becomes like an ideological largeness.
Right. And well, in the impact of these sequences, it's a marriage of the practical filmmaking and then the digital extension, and like the balance of that is
Definitely.
essential. And
Also, this is a
yeah.
Kurosawa thing he talks about, where you don't show the battle, you just show the after results of everyone dead, because
Yeah.
he talks about like, yeah, this being a thing that you see in like the Hidden Fortress and several of his other movies, where like often in his commentary he's talking about, it's like, oh, how do you stage conflict in an interesting way where it's not just like repeating dudes bashing each other, and he says, really the audience doesn't ultimately care about like, and like if a battle is there, it has to, the process of the conflict has to be interesting. Like the
Yeah.
audience doesn't just want to see people hurting each other. They want to see like, oh, what happens as a result of this. They want to see the consequences of it. And he says, listen, if the audiences hate this guy and what he stands for, if they hate Guy, then they know that he's going to lose. They know he's going to fuck up, right? So ultimately, they just want to see that. They don't want to see like just like a 20-minute scene of dudes getting murked, right? They just want to see like, oh, something wrong has happened.
Yeah. And he's still observing the formalities. You hand the cup of ice to, your opposite.
See, I love this bit where he's like, he thinks he's being poisoned with the chicken, and then he has this happen to him with the cup of water. He's like, I did
Mm.
not give the fucking water to you, motherfucker, you piece of shit. You guy who's like slaughtered my people senselessly.
Mm.
And he just gets murked. Like, yeah, fuck this guy.
I love the emotion in Masood's performance here, where it finally like the veneer cracks and he's just furious with this
Because
guy.
it's like the guy, you gotta throw down. Like
Yeah,
it's
fuck this guy.
yeah, there comes the limit. Then he emerges into the light.
Mm-hmm. And man, the line that he gives Guy at the end of this scene, the little button on it, is just so perfect. Where he's just like, "A king cannot kill a king. Were you not close enough to a great king to learn from his example?"
Yeah, normally I criticize some directors who use like step frames uh, as like slow mo, but Ridley knows how to do it right because he doesn't. I think a lot of other directors use it in like the same way that John Woo would use like like a high frame rate photography, but Ridley always uses it to like emphasize like the slowness of moments, like
Yeah.
not just like he like wants to linger in like the thought of the character in the middle of what's going on that's like being slowed down into the step frames.
No, that's a perfect description of how they can be used well. I mean, he's no Kevin Costner. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's right. Look at this, dude. This is so horrifying to me. Like the idea of like
Imagine how that smelled.
not only a bunch of dead bodies, they smell awful, and you just have fucking a cacophony of birds that just won't go the fuck away, right? Like they're just everywhere.
Man, yeah, I love those George R. R. Martin Song of Ice and Fire books where they talk about. I mean, in the books, you're able to kind of go three dimensionally into like, yeah, just the sensory experience of the battlefield, and I think this may be Jeremy Irons' last scene in the movie.
Yeah, the 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 power of his performance here. I just love this bit where you realize like maybe I won't. Once upon a time he was like, Guy, right? He's like, oh, I'm here to like fight for Christ. And I'm here to just do all this stuff, and like he realizes like, oh, all this is pointless, and the only thing worth preserving is as much life as we can. And like at this point, he's like, we couldn't even do that. Like, there's just nothing else I can do here. It's almost as if he realizes, it was only through luck and circumstance that I, didn't have my own head on a pike. Maybe his own behavior was just as reprehensible. And yeah,
Right.
you see him here, his head among all the decapitated ones.
Mm.
It's like it doesn't spare you if like you're a cool guy or whatever. Like all that death was just it gets equalized in the end as to be a slaughter.
There's a good argument to be made that like part of why Balian and Tiberius's roads diverge in the woods is because you need to be a young guy to really like to only know what you know and to not be aware of all the ways that things can go wrong.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Well, he's not been broken by this yet, and so he's able
yeah,
to actually affect something because he's not
right.
overburdened with the wisdom of having to make all these mistakes all for all these years.
Right. And what does that say about wisdom, right? It has like a max capacity.
Well, it's like absolute knowledge results in inaction because you're too knowledgeable to really do anything in particular because you're aware of the drawbacks. But like every great action is a result of at least a little stupidity.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I
well
love this
said.
bit where he's like, you see him like using tactics to like understand the layout of what a siege would look like. And so he's like painting markers for various distances and like using the rope as a measurement. And he has his own like kind of like primitive scope that he can use to extend his eye.
Yeah, yeah, and like it's just fascinating. I mean, like because he knows that he can't defeat the army and he cannot in perpetuity hold the city, so he's just going to try and kind of like break off as many pieces as he can of the opposing force to get them to offer terms.
Yeah, he's just like, yeah, like what can I do to make it so this isn't just a butchery?
Yeah. Oh, and then and we haven't talked about this guy yet. This character who's just like the priest who's just
Yeah, him talking about
a
like,
piece
oh,
of
it's
shit.
unfortunate
Yeah.
about the people, but it's God's will. It's like, all right, so it's also God's will that you get to escape. Like, fuck you, dude.
Yeah, this guy he could be like a character on the Righteous Gemstones.
Oh, I love this speech he's about to give.
If you're gonna stop grind the movie to a halt for a speech, it should be for a speech this good.
Yeah, definitely.
And then Sibylla looking out at him, realizes, I'm drawn to him for more than just a pretty face.
I like his reversal. It's like because no one has particular claim to the city, like that means it's for everyone involved. Like it's not about like this faction or that faction. It's about protecting life.
That should always be the goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, and of course this is the gravedigger from early in the movie.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you get that notice, and he's like, it's like, oh, he ended up here too. Like strange bedfellows. Tenova, it's like the priest only recognizes the hierarchy of knights that have left
Yeah.
and that have been slaughtered pointlessly. And you know, and Balian's just like fuck it, man. Like anyone could be a knight. It's like if you're here, like you're fighting in knightly conduct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, it's like he gives this like for the willingness to take action. It's like listen, if you're willing to die a knight, you're capable of being one. And honestly, I think there's like no better definition of like what courage is than that. It's like look, you can you can have whatever like arbitrary distinction that makes sense for you if you're willing to actually abide by what that distinction means.
Right, and conferring, the title and the power, or and as arbitrary as that may be, it gives these people the courage to go beyond what their idea of what their limits are.
Yeah, because it's not like, all right, well, we just give up or whatever, or we just resign ourselves to the fate. It's like, listen, man, like this is all our
Yeah,
homes. We got to do something.
yeah, or that the other guy's better than you somehow, because he's got this title. And it's like, no, I got the big pointy thing,
I love
just as
this
well
bit.
as he does. Yeah.
He's like I'm not what I was, and nor are you. Rise at night.
Hmm.
Fuck, rise at night. That's the good shit right there.
Yeah, and then of course, yeah, this is where they use the 13th Warrior, the Valhalla theme, that great piece of music. Jerry Goldsmith, I believe, wrote it.
I love, Dude, it's hype as shit. Does being a knight make him a better fighter? He's like, it's like the Chad, like, yes, absolutely it does.
Yeah, that's like that meme with the. That's great.
Yeah, we get the kind of Holy Land theme again from Harry Gregson Williams.
Mm.
God, okay, so before we have the big siege, guys, listen to the commentary, whoever you are. Just want to say, I fucking love this movie. Like, please watch this film, please. It's so good. It makes me so happy. And like, if I could share any enjoyment, I should have started off with this, but if I could share any enjoyment that I've gotten from this, like, truly, this is. I could watch this film any day. I could watch it over and over again. It's just one of those that is like inspiring and it's smart and it's emotional and it's just it's everything that I love about Ridley, where he applies his artistry to such a broad palette, but never misses out on the particulars and just gives you everything you want in a story. You know, you get romance, you get the fucking like the crazy action, you get like this discussion of like religious and philosophic themes, you get beauty, you get kind of a sense of like sadness and melancholy. Like it's a complete emotional experience to me. It feels like I don't know, like what films can be. This movie has in spades, and I think it's so worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, truly one of those like desert island films where
Oh
like
yeah,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
just does everything.
I should make a list of like desert island movies because there's actually like fewer than I would even say. There's not that many, and Castaway is not one of them.
No,
I
God, that
love
would
this
suck.
bit. Look, you like it's like the middle of the night. You see all the lights and the arrows with fire. I mean,
Yeah,
that's fucking mise en scène, motherfuckers. That's how it's done.
and it's in very much in vogue now, but like you know, it's meant to be seen on the largest canvas possible. This is a theatrical experience.
Oh yeah. Look, if I ever get the chance to see this in theaters, my ass is gonna do that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'm hoping to see more and more of these revivals over the years,
Yeah.
where they
I mean, I
show.
would love to make a film with this kind of scale. I would love to. I don't know if I could do it, but I would love to try. Dude, like honestly, getting hit with a fucking flaming fireball, one of the worst ways to go, I'll admit. Kind of sucks.
Well, I would love to see you try that.
Yeah. Getting hit with a fireball. Yeah, I
No,
don't
no,
know if I want to
making
do
a
that.
film like this, yeah. um,
So, okay, let's talk about like because this siege goes on fairly long. Like in terms of like the great siege scenes in movies, like I think this is definitely one of them for me. I know what is it, the Battle of Helm's Deep, right? That's another great siege. Like what are the other ones you could think of, right? Like siege scenes.
hmm, God, I don't know. I mean, I really like Braveheart. That was before I saw this film, or even Gladiator. Like, I just kind of fell in love with the tactile quality of like the battlefield sequences.
I feel like the one from Last of the Mohicans is pretty good.
Oh yes, that is a good one. And you got to, I mean, you have to imagine like just doing it at night is just, I don't know. I mean, I couldn't tell you if that's more or less challenging
Does
than
the one
doing
from
it
Army
in
of
the
Darkness
daytime.
count? I think it does, right?
Yeah, yeah, with like, and there you get some of that Harryhausen, like puppets and stuff, which are so much fun.
That's right.
But
Oh, I would love to
but
do that too. Um, I'm also thinking like every zombie movie is also kind of a siege film. John
yeah,
Carpenter's made a lot of these too, like Assault on Precinct 13. That's a siege movie. I'd say that's up there. Like anytime where it's like you have a bunch of dudes who just have to, fucking protect a place, and
or
it's like
aliens.
or aliens. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
true. It's a little more complicated though. I don't know
yeah,
because yeah, it's like they're navigating the space too. I don't know. It's a little bit different. There's a lot of westerns that have this. And I think I was talking to you last commentary about The Outpost. That's
yeah.
other
The
movie that's
Iraq
all
War
about
movie,
this.
right?
Yeah.
And you know what? I gotta say, like, I'm not a big fan of war films, or like, I'm not as like this part of the movie is it must be included, but it's like the kind of like the dollars and cents of like both sides trying to massacre each other. it's not as close to my heart, I guess, as like.
Oh well, sure.
But
I just think, I mean, at this point in the movie, I think it's like you're just watching the consequences of what's been developed so far play
right.
themselves out, and like for me, it's exciting very much. But
Oh,
um,
especially when they're praying. See this kind of stuff, right? Where it's like everything
yeah,
stops
like
so that
these
they
are
can.
great. Like
Yeah.
this is like the Ridley touch right here. This is like such a great scene, and I mean, I think the structure of the siege allows him to kind of like have pauses in between the fighting, so it doesn't just become like, just a pure like blah, like it doesn't become just that. Um, but yeah, no, I see what you mean. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
have no problem with it. But you know what's a movie that basically like is nothing but just the pure cacophony of battle is like Black Hawk Down. And I think really
yeah.
it's like he made one of those movies and he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not doing that again.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, this if you're going to do it, this is about as well as it could be accomplished.
Yeah, and also I think as a depiction of medieval warfare, this is about as good as it gets, really. Like I can't think of much better.
And you got to love, I mean, now we're getting into the section where we see Balian's preparations, being bearing fruit, right?
Well,
Because
that's what
he's
I
like
like
laid
about it.
us.
It's
Yeah.
like this is a movie where it's like you have to use tactics. You have to use, you know, your brain power of how to set stuff up. It's not just like, I got a sword, let's kill each other. It's not just that. It's we have to navigate the battle as intelligently as we can in order to survive at all. Because if you don't, then like you have to use whatever advantages are available to. Also, the fucking Wilhelm scream, dude. Ridley,
Oh, right, right,
thank you for the Wilhelm scream. Bless up, let's go. I mean, the way that like Ridley shoots these trebuchets, like holy shit, right? Like fucking just ripping it. Like, I mean, he's always just so skilled at this really visceral combat stuff. Like there's been a lot of people who try to rip this style off, and none of them have ever really equaled it, in my opinion.
I really enjoyed. I talk about it an annoying amount, but Michaud's The King, which was like it came out on Netflix. It's like very annoyingly you have to watch it on Netflix. It had a brief theatrical window, but there's some siege warfare in that one, and there's a very like muddy and glorious like earthy quality to like the combat that I think I would not say that it exceeds this, but I think um, it has its own lane, and I think it does what it does remarkably well, and just like giving us a little taste of what it may have looked and felt like to be in
Right.
one of the in this warfare.
Yeah, when you look at like the hugeness of these practical sets, I mean, God, right? Like, I don't. It's
Yeah,
just
what?
so like the scale astounds more than anything else. Oh, like, and the fact like they throw the grenades, that's like Molotov cocktails at people. It's
Yeah,
brutal.
yeah. A couple little moments like there's a moment coming up where Saladin just watches all of his siege towers fall down one by one,
Oh,
and
great moment. I mean,
just
that's
has to
like
sit with that. Yeah.
that's like the Spielberg thing, right? It's like you get the
Yes.
kinetic like dominoes falling into each other. Like Spielberg loves to do that kind of thing.
Hmm. It's also a moment coming up. It's just one of those like handful of moments that I think about when I'm not watching the film. But it's when they dig trenches to put the dead in, after like a day of fighting, and they've got to decide whether or not like it's unholy to like burn the corpses so that they don't fester and get the rest of
Yeah.
the troops sick. And yeah, it's
Well, I mean, it's an instance of where it's like, listen, like it's more holy to save lives than it is to like the
yeah,
desecration of corpses. You have to place judgments here. Honestly, okay, like respect to like medieval people or whatever, like pouring tar on people and like oil and stuff. It's a little bit fucked up. I gotta say, I'm glad we don't do that so much anymore.
yeah. I mean,
I mean, one could say we do equally worse things, but I'm glad
sure.
specifically it's like I don't have to worry about being coated in tar.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad. I mean, just not glad, but like through my my dad's experience with the Vietnam War, and or his brother fought, and their friends, and Agent Orange, and the ramifications of that, the use of napalm. I mean, it's like these things, like the consequences of these actions span generations. The ways we choose to kill people.
Yeah, in a way, napalm isn't really that different from like pouring tar on people. It's basically the same thing. It's just more accelerated. Yeah, this shit is so fucking cool. Like these like ballistas. I love the sounds they make. Like Ridley's always good at like sounds of like his techniques and his devices. Everything sounds great.
Yeah, it's truly a collaborative medium. I mean, I think like, and on my long list of reasons why, I've always been drawn to film is that like it takes a village to accomplish this singular moment that we all experience.
Oh man, like dude, this bit where like she's like cutting her hair and like her reflection changes into
So
the king's
cool.
reflection.
And like, I mean, that decision to just kind of like to go a little bit surreal, I guess, to like kind of put you into the mind
Yeah, I
of the
mean, like
character in
what
that
I like
moment.
about
It's
Ridley is that he's never stuck just making like kind of like a banal, like realistic thing. He always has these poetic touches that
yeah,
like don't abide by the dictums of realism.
because it's like, and that's to me, it's you're always just you're trying to aim for like the most emotional impact, the most visceral impact you can get through whichever technique is available at any given scene. And on the one hand, you respect the discipline of certain filmmakers by just kind of staying in a particular artistic lane and not and
But I
rigidly
think
like
I think that what separates the journeyman from the masters is that the masters are able to exist in that space while providing a variety from within it, right?
yeah.
It's like Spielberg can have movies about like, oh, it's like sentimental about the family, but they can also be like a Minority Report where you're like, oh man, this is pretty harrowing. Like he's able to have flexibility. He's not defined by like a gimmick.
Yeah. Well, Minority Report's one of those movies that like it's been quite a while since I've seen it, so I'm sure my brain has probably changed a lot since I first saw it.
Oh, you should definitely watch it again. It's a
Yeah.
masterpiece, one of his best. Oh, dude, the editing, the montage
Yeah,
on this
yeah.
like this thing being firing with the grapple hook.
Clank, clank, clank,
I
clank,
mean,
clank. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just perfect. Like it's aced. Like masterful editing. Just exactly what you want. The guy's on fire falling off.
Oh, and here's talk about Spielberg. Yeah. Got the
Oh
dolly
yeah, yeah.
zoom.
Kind of a Jaws shot. Yeah, there's a lot of like things that are satisfying in movies, but seeing a big thing fall down, it's pretty satisfying. Never really
Yeah.
fails. I love this cut between them. He's like, "You son of a bitch."
Yeah, he's just like, well, this is a lot more challenging than I thought it would be. My girlfriend works in an escape room, and Lady Gaga came in the other day.
What?
This is kind of like Lady Gaga, coming to the escape room of the Crusades, right? Because she's just trying to blend in. Yeah.
Right, right. Okay, I just want to say like whether her hair is long or short, like fuck, like she's still
Gorgeous.
hot. She's still
Yeah.
so gorgeous. Fuck. And see, I do like the idea that she's like, well, if everything's for loss, like I might as well try to make people not die as much.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough. That looks so rough, man.
Those pre-penicillin days.
Oh, it just shows you. It's like, yeah, like you can wear chainmail, but like you're still gonna get cut from that shit. Like the impact
Hmm.
of the sword, it's a lot.
Mm. Yeah. So this little touch where his composure nearly breaks. He almost starts weeping, but then he yanks himself back up.
Yeah. I mean, a great thing about this movie is that you're always the humanity is always emphasized. You know, you're never
Yeah.
left with a bunch of people who just don't care about anything. It's always, you know, it's about contrast, and it's about, you know, brutality, but also with empathy. You know, you get both.
Well, right, and like I think it's impossible to obscure the soul of the artist when I mean, a lot of terrible people have made great films and whatnot. We are all familiar with that conversation, but like, I don't know, just like the heart of the person who made something like this. I mean, you have to assume that there's some good values at play here, and that's why I'm always confused. I'm not going to say I know the answer, but like, a lot of schools of thought about Michael Bay, and like, how socialist is ambulance or whatever, and like,
Yeah, well,
but like,
that's a bit of a fraught effort, I would say. But
yeah, but like this movie is just like, it's about one of the bloodiest times in human history. But yeah,
yeah,
that
and I
empathy
think it's
shines through
about
it.
things that anyone can relate to, and relate to in a complicated way, in a nuanced way. I mean, I think Ridley's best movies are the ones um, where he is attached to like a story that has a very specific and uh, understanding, like political or spiritual or moral perspective. You know, it's like when you watch
Mhm.
Thelma and Louise, like you're never in doubt that those women deserve the world, right? You're never like the movie's always on their side no matter what. And I think, you know, Ridley's like, he's one of those guys who's like a little bit, you know, he doesn't always work with the best scripts, but I think, yeah, his best ones are the ones where you can really feel the presence of a firm point of view, and he can really make that shine by just expressing it on the biggest palette.
Yeah. Now the aerial shot of before the fade out that's coming up, where like there's literally just it's like a sea of chainmailed bodies just kind of like squeezed together, just trying to
Yeah.
chop each other to bits, is one of the all timer Ridley shots, I think.
Oh yeah, it's him at his best.
So this is the last stand.
Dude, the fucking like the rocks like
Yeah,
just shooting through at a million miles an hour through the stone. It's like it'll never not hit me right in my gut. It's
yeah.
so fucking visceral.
And I like that this is a little more impressionistic. Like we don't like, and I think that part of why how this decision was arrived at is just like the close quarters
Well,
practicalities of it, and
because
yeah,
Ridley talks about, it's like, all right, instead of just having another scene of like people wailing on each other, we've already done that. He always
yeah,
wants to make this stuff have variety. So he's like, what if we staged it in a way that emphasizes like the grandiosity and the big scale? And
mm,
um, you know, again, it's choices like that that like I think make him, you know, my favorite filmmaker. Is that it's like he's not only thinking of like what looks good, but like what is enjoyable to watch. Like film is montage of different scenes, right? So even if you're staging conflict, you have to keep showing new facets of it. And so it's like when you have this and like the music comes in, you realize like it's like, oh man, like all this is tragic, all this is you know,
yeah.
this could have been avoided in a better world. And it's him uh breaking into a space of the transcendent within something that's like really, you know, sad and unfortunate.
Right. And the first time I became acquainted with that was that scene in Gladiator when they're fighting the Gauls in the beginning, and then there's this moment where the dog it's towards the end of the battle, like Maximus's first battle in the forest, and the dog runs in and starts like mauling a guy. And that's when like the sound effects drop out and the music rises, and it's a lot like this sequence where like I mean
Yeah,
you just described it much better
it's
than
like
I could,
the
but yeah.
pitch of the tone modulates, and you enter into a different space that it's like you get above the fray, right? And you
Yeah.
attain like almost like a yeah, like again, it's transcendent. It's a God's eye perspective on something, and
You see the
you know,
tragedy of it.
yeah, exactly. Because you're so caught up in it otherwise throughout the battle that like this part makes it seem like you're like fuck, like none of this should be happening.
Hmm.
And then you have the fade out from like all the moving bodies into just the dead stillness, and I mean, like those moments of pure poetry. I think. I mean, it's like who else but Ridley is doing stuff like that in this space? Not a whole lot, really. That's the kind of stuff that Kurosawa would do.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the aspects of 300 that didn't suck were him trying to affect something like that on like a fraction of the budget.
Definitely,
And
yeah.
yeah.
Because Ridley's films are fairly rapidly edited. They're fairly, tight. They're very concise, but he always
Yeah,
leaves
he's
a room for these quiet moments. I think he never lets that go away. And I think that's, again, that's his genius. Is that anyone else would let that stuff slide.
mm. Oh, so I'd forgotten. Yeah, Master Gravedigger gets offed.
Fuck, dude. So many, just everyone gets off. Like
Yeah.
it's brutal, man. You just fucking that's sad as shit.
And so we can assume, I suppose, that like so many people died in this choke point that like Saladin had to kind of like put a pin in it.
But yeah,
And
because
that's
it just
maybe
realized
why.
it's like, all right, this just becomes like a meat grinder of
Yeah.
nonsense.
This is a great scene here between them.
I mean, this is a painting right here. Look at this.
Hmm.
Like,
Oh, and this is where the priest says, convert now, repent later.
yeah, and it's like you see that it's like he respects the structures of power rather than faith, right? Like he doesn't
Yeah.
care about the virtue; he cares about the power that religion holds, and I think that's what Balian learns from. He's like, yeah, you taught me a lot.
Yeah, he's actually taking it seriously. Like, what are the implications of believing these things? Shout out to Saladin's armor being amazing.
Oh yeah,
The gold scales.
yeah, he looks amazing. Yeah, I like him just like rocking up, being like, I don't give a fuck. Like we will literally just like you will like. I think it's like Saladin's like, all right. He's like, this is the one guy who's not trying to outsmart me. He's not trying to like do a military deployment. Like this guy is just acting out of pure like conviction, you know?
Well, right.
And it's like you
And
can't
that's
get
yeah.
past someone like that. Like you really can't. It's like you can defeat him, but it's like, what would that cost Saladin? It's like his army would be evaporated, right? He'd have the
Hmm.
Holy Lands, but like what if another crusading army came by? He wouldn't be able to hold it. Like he realizes like it's like fuck you. Like you really like it's better to reason with someone who has actual convictions rather than trying to just fucking like bulldoze through them, because like they're the one person that won't bend to your will, right? So it's like if you can work around with them towards a better end, like that's ultimately the best. Yeah, because he's like, what separates him from others, he's like, I am not those men. I am Saladin.
And thank God for that.
I'm like, man, would there be any like movie release nowadays where it's like, oh yeah, the main hero, like his most heroic act is to surrender?
Well, I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but it just seems like we've reached a point where, like, I mean, I don't know. It's like unless you're somebody like Christopher Nolan, like, how much thoughtfulness is are we going to be able? We'll leach into movies of this scale, and
Yeah, not much really. I mean, and like really, that's it's like the entire movie is contained in that little last bit of conversation. It's like, what is Jerusalem worth? He's like, nothing,
Yeah.
everything. Like to hold that contradiction where this place that birthed all these different cultures, it's worth so much. At the end of the day, though, it's like what does any of it matter if there's no people there to appreciate it? If it doesn't exist, if you have to destroy it in order to affect your will on it, like what does it matter? You lose the very thing that you're fighting over.
Yeah. And I just absolutely love this sequence that follows where of the transition to power and kind of like it's a little bit ahead, but like where Saladin's like kind of walking in these slow motion shots, these low angle shots through the conquered city, and that moment you described earlier where he picks the cross up off the ground and sets it back on the table.
Yeah, because it's like you realize at a point, it's like, fuck, you know what? It's not about like like to navigate these complex aspects of power. I mean, look, like they're all cheering him because he just like saved all their fucking lives,
Yeah.
with their help. And it's like, really, it's like, yeah, the people, these people aren't here to like fucking murder or destroy anyone. And it's like to try and deftly understand that situation. It requires like a degree of earnestness that again most people just don't feel they can express in an adequate way. Then I think this movie makes a powerful statement where it's like, yeah, like the one guy who's able to at least temporarily, give some relief to this deadlock of conflict is the one who was just like, all right, you know what? It's like, listen, like you want this city, we'll give you this city, but we like we none of us really want to just fucking like murder all the people. And it's like by navigating with Saladin on personal terms, by respecting him as a human being, he's able to respect human life in general.
Now here is the little. So this was new, or this is particular to the Director's Roadshow.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Okay. We get this like kind of the scuff up. It's like one last little bit between him and Guy.
It's a great fight, though. I mean,
Oh, it's
and I'm
wonderful.
glad, yeah. And this guy obviously he worked out a lot for the performance, and why not give him like a big ass fight scene to go out on?
Yeah, because it's like the one thing that hasn't been resolved yet. And like, I mean, yeah, again, look at that. We're all of us what we do, right?
Hmm.
And it's just like the simplicity of that. And what I love is like the final fight in this movie about the Crusades is, you know, not between Christianity and Islam, but it's between like two Christians and like one
Hmm.
like who represents like the good side of that and the one who represents the corrupted side of that. And I think that's a powerful statement. I think Ridley knows exactly what he's doing. I think it's, just it's a great thing to show. Also, like when you get into this part with the tapestries, like this is almost like going into
Yeah.
like 80s Ridley mode, like we're kind of getting into like Black Rain territory. It's interesting.
It's interesting to contemplate too, like his ideal ending, Guy's ideal ending. Of course, it would have been to to win the Holy War, but as a second priority to get killed in the conflict, and now he's left
And
with
have the
like
nobility of like, oh, at least I died fighting or whatever. It's like,
right, and
man,
now
you're
it's like
doing
he's nothing, So like, what is he gonna, what is he gonna decide to be now? And you know, we'll see, I guess.
I mean, like to me, like this is like I wouldn't describe myself as a Christian, but like this is the kind of Christian stuff that I really means a lot to me. Where he's like, it's like I'm not gonna fucking kill you. It's like if you rise again, like you better actually be a knight this time. Like
Hmm.
that stuff is like so poignant and meaningful to me. It's like the ultimate way to defeat someone is to just be like, you know what, man, like be what you're supposed to be. Like don't be this lesser version of yourself. Like actually own up to what matters in this world, and the perch that you've fallen from. Actually, stand tall instead of kneeling away from your convictions that you're supposed to have.
Hmm.
I mean, if yeah, I think that's just like the valuable message in Christianity is like to forgive someone is, it's not just about like absolving them, but it's about forcing them to be what they're supposed to be, and you know, have the space to be better and not just to be destroyed, you know, like some other people might do.
Yeah, as the Hospitaller says, holiness is in right action. So there's our beliefs, but then what,
And it's like the most righteous action would be to make it so that someone could act in a more righteous way in the future.
hmm Hmm. It is not a very good horse.
I love these little callbacks. I mean, again, this, you know, William Monahan, like, I mean, this script is so excellent. Like, when you look at The Departed is like much more of like a scattershot affair. This is like so tight. Just everything is done expertly.
Yeah, I mean, clearly a labor of love. And is novelistic, can we call it novelistic? I don't even know what that
I would
means.
say so. I would say
Yeah.
so.
But I mean, but again, but for him to do The Departed and this sort of like back to back, I mean, of course, we don't know the timeline of when they were written, but that's um that's a real breadth of abilities there
Oh
to be
yeah,
able to
pretty
write. Yeah.
nuts. Yeah, two huge movies.
So is this where Bram Stoker's Dracula begins, or?
Well, I don't know when Dracula actually lived, like the real guy. So I don't
Yeah.
know. And it's again, it's like this movie grants solid interiority. You know,
hmm
it's like you get these moments where it like focuses on these little bits of poetry with him, and like he walks around the cross instead of over it. It's like I don't know. Yeah, it just means a lot to me. It's wonderful.
Yeah. The falling rose petals. Like I'm not aware of the like cultural or historical significance of them, but that was
Oh
one thing I
yeah,
liked about Gladiator as well, as just that
that's
little
right.
atmospheric detail.
I mean, I'm sure it means like something in some other context or another, but half of me is also of a mind that Ridley's just like, oh,
Looks cool.
that's some cool mise en scène. Don't let it in there.
Yeah. The Road to Burning Man.
Yeah, and what I like about this is that it's not just like they don't just say that like everyone's getting released. Like Ridley actually shows you. You know, he's a visual storyteller first and foremost, and he's wanting to show you like the like that what people like what Saladin says comes to pass, right? That
Mm.
there's a reality to these words.
They're a cute couple.
I mean, like I haven't commented on it that much, but like okay, like you as okay, like you're straight, right? Definitely
Yeah.
straight. Like, do
Uh-huh.
you recognize that Orlando Bloom is like a beautiful, handsome man? Because
Oh
he
yeah.
absolutely is, and like of his generation, probably the most handsomest guy. Like he just
Yeah.
looks like. I mean,
Well, less so in Lord of the Rings, like because Lord of the Rings, he was next to Viggo Mortensen, who was just
well,
another gorgeous
but
specimen.
it's
So
it's two different types of beauty, but especially in this movie, I think this is the handsomest he ever looks, and it's just like really perfect. And I don't know, just like yeah, him and Eva Green together. It's like, oh, you have these two beautiful people. You just couldn't get better.
well, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get in shape in over the years in recovery, and Orlando Bloom never slept on his workout regimen since this
Oh
movie, and so
no,
I
he
would count
still looks
it.
amazing.
Yeah, so I would definitely count him like a motivation or I guess inspiration for the stuff I do. That's my kingdom of heaven. I'll never get there, but it's the attempt.
Yeah,
And then of course, yeah, the tree that grew in his absence.
I love this. I mean, it's just like when you talk about it being novelistic. I think this is a lot of that. Like it's like you come back home, like the hero's journey has ended, but something has changed. You know, the sky is no longer dark and blue and dreary.
hmm And then we get Ian Glenn as the Sean
Yeah, I was
Connery
about to
of
say, yeah.
this movie.
It's funny, like when I see England, I always think of the Resident Evil movies. So
Oh, I gotta watch those. Yeah.
yeah, I can't help but see that within all of his performances. But it's kind of weird because Ridley also makes a movie where it's like with Robin Hood, where Richard the Lionheart dies, right? So it's like we kind of see like the beginning of his crusade right here, right? And then we go back, and then we get to Robin Hood, and we see the end of his death, right? There's like some kind of, I'm not saying like, because they're obviously different stories, but I wonder if he ever thought about those kind of being connecting chapters.
Well, man, I did not particularly care for Ridley's Robin Hood, but I loved one of my favorite touches in it was the way he depicted Richard the Lionheart is just
Yeah,
this
it's a
insane
different
drunk
actor.
loser.
It's
Yeah.
not Ian Glenn, but yeah,
It's Danny Houston. Yeah.
Danny Houston. You're right. Fuck. Wow, I forgot about that. A little noodling here, a little
Yeah.
voice. It's beautiful. And she comes back.
Yeah, and I'm glad she brought some cool wardrobe items with her.
Yeah, she's like in like a D&D cloak or something.
She's like, yeah, Queen never walks, but I'm bringing a big chest of my goodies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, gotta say first. And I love this. Like they just go off writing together. Like to me, it's such a for a movie that deals with such heavy, brutal topics. It's like him like pausing at his wife's grave. Like that it ends in a place of like hope and introspection. I think it's just perfect. Like it's the
Yeah,
perfect note to end on. And then you get the theme again and fade out and
a little
fuck
coda here.
the coda. Yeah.
Yeah, the shape of the narrative. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah, then also the thing, nearly 1,000 years later, peace in the kingdom of heaven remains elusive. It's like, yeah, yeah, yep.
There we go.
Ridley. Oh my man. Fuck.
I'd love to see him try to do another. I mean, like I don't know, why
Well, he's
not,
doing
right? I mean,
Napoleon.
yeah. Oh, yes, forgot about that.
Yeah, no, Ridley's never stopped making these big movies. This is his bag. This is what he does best.
I heard there was some discourse, which I've been pretty busy the last couple of days, so I haven't been able to pop online as much. But when that Napoleon trailer dropped, I'd heard that there was some like people were like, well, maybe these movies are very boring, or like Ridley's not good at making them, and I thought
No,
that was funny.
fuck them, man. Fuck these
Right? Yeah.
motherfuckers. What's not boring to them? Like what?
Well, I mean, yeah, I have no. I mean, it's just to me that's disqualifying to say that.
I mean, whatever. That's a matter of taste. I
Yeah.
mean, I love movies about various periods of history because I always end up learning new stuff and
Yeah.
getting new perspectives. And Ridley makes a lot of these. I mean, not all of them are perfect, right? Like you said, like Robin Hood is not. I mean, it's kind of not good. And I would say, what's the other one that he did? Yeah, Exodus is like Exodus
Mhm.
is. It's got some interesting ideas, but it's a little bit like,
They were
okay.
like 1942. I mean, but the thing is that like as opposed to like I mean Tarantino, ostensibly is going to be retiring soon because of life reasons and also because he wants that impeccable filmography.
Well, also yeah, because
And
he's a narcissist.
yeah, yeah, but like man, I respect the shit out of just like Ridley's always working. He's always moving on to the next thing, and they're not always going to like land 100%. But
But
like,
he doesn't have a
yeah,
vanity to his artistry. Like he doesn't fucking
no, it's
like
just what he does.
yeah. To
Yeah,
him, it's not about like I want a spotless record. It's like I want to hit the high highs. That's what he wants to do. And fuck, I mean, to me, that's being a true artist. A true artist is not like, oh, I'm flawless, because no one is. Because no human
right.
being is flawless, and nor should they. Right? The flaws are what you know. Those are equally as much as your strengths. What creates you as a great artist. That they feed into your artistry. And so yeah. No, I mean, like Ridley to me, again, much like Clint, who I love, him and Clint, it's just like they just keep going, not giving up. They just never stop stopping. And
Yeah,
I mean, like Clint's gonna die making a movie. I feel like Ridley is probably gonna do the same, but it's like when you look at his career, fuck. I mean, again, not everything works, and again, like a lot of stuff that I dislike too. Like I don't like stuff like Matchstick Men. I don't like 1492.
mhm.
But when stuff does work, I challenge anyone. Like who does it better, right? Like who incorporates the total package and the capabilities of modern filmmaking better than he does. It's, you're not going to really find that many. I would say this. It's like, yeah, it's like you want to criticize him. It's like, oh, these movies are boring. It's like, okay, well, what do you find interesting? it's, I mean, that's what I would say. I think Ridley does this stuff in the most interesting way possible.
Yeah. I when you said, I think you had said he's your favorite director, right?
Yes, he is. Yeah, I mean, he's the reason I got into film. I saw Alien when I was like I was like 6 years old or something, and I just was obsessed with it because it made such an impact on me. I was like, I never have seen a movie that felt so real to me. It was so dark, and it was, it had all these like strange things in it that I didn't understand, and I wanted to understand what it was about. So I started reading about how films were actually made, and then I remember my dad bought me the DVD because I had the VHS that I was watching it, and I mean that's the thing that we don't talk about really, but Ridley has done director's commentaries for I think almost every single one of his films.
Wow, I haven't listened to one of them, so I'm
You
definitely
should
forward to.
absolutely do
Yeah.
that because that's what made me like film. That's what got me into it because I was listening to the commentary he did for Alien, and he was talking. It's like, oh, and this is what the grip does, and like he kind of
Mm,
explains the process of making a movie. And I was like, oh my god, I didn't understand that all this stuff went into it. Like he was, it's in a way those commentaries were like an initiatory form of like film appreciation, film school, cinephilia. Like he just lays it out, and he's like kind of like he's a sly old guy, and so he's always like, you know, making it interesting, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. And I just like listening to all those because I would just seek them out every time. I was like, oh, here's a Ridley movie. It's going to come with a commentary, and it just taught me so much about like, yeah, what's a shot choice, what's a setup, what's like how do you light things. He just talks about all this stuff, and I think that's an invaluable resource. Unfortunately, in like an age of streaming and stuff, you don't get as many commentaries, but I think they're like really um I mean, to me, again, it was just invaluable. I love that stuff.
that's one of it's going to be a relic, I suppose, of the analog, the discs,
Well, no, it's not.
era.
It's
Yeah.
not. You know why? Think about what we're doing right now. This is why I'm recording these
Ah.
commentaries. This is why I do this. I just want to like share, what Ridley gave me in those commentaries he did. I mean, I didn't make these films, obviously, but to show appreciation for it. Like, look, I'm gonna fucking talk for 3 hours about Kingdom of Heaven with you. That's what I want to do. That's what I care about. That's what means things to me about cinema. Just like appreciating things in a very deep way and an enthusiastic way, and not being ironic about it, and trying to come to grips with art, which is really all that matters in my life. Like this is the thing that matters most, and so I want to put as much effort into it as I can. And I think Ridley's one of those guys, as being such a prolific filmmaker as he is, he's just never stopped trying. He's never, again, like Clint, he's just been like, I don't give a shit. Like sometimes I'll make garbage, I don't care. I'm just going to keep trying and
Mhm.
keep exploring new territories. And it's like, yeah, once in a while he fucking makes Alien or Kingdom of Heaven. Like, I mean, yeah, that's the dream, man. Like he's one
Yeah,
of my heroes.
mine too. Yeah, art is the best part of us.
Because
The
you think
best
about this
thing.
movie's philosophy, right? It's like you're defined by your actions. It's like you're defined by just the effort of what you're doing. I mean, that's Ridley's filmography. He's
Mm.
he's just never ceased to really push himself, and you know he's never been afraid of failure, right? And
Well,
like
I
when we talk
think,
about Tarantino, I think that's like the sad thing where it's like some directors are, unfortunately.
yeah, exactly. They're just it's there's a more than normal amount of ego that's a part of the work, or more
Yeah.
than usual. But I think Ridley's entitled. I think that he has to finish his Prometheus trilogy. I'd be very
Oh
disappointed
no! Oh no! 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 Okay, maybe not that. Maybe not
Oh, really?
that.
Okay, you're
well,
not buying.
well. I don't know. Maybe I need to watch those movies again. But I would rather him like do literally anything else. But it's
Well,
okay.
just to see what was really on his mind, as far as like, clearly there was a larger story that he is was trying to tell with those, and despite their inconsistencies, I wanted to see where it was all going.
Sure. Yeah. So, oh yeah, you're right. Song from Blade too. So, uh, yeah, I think if people, listen to our previous commentaries, they know what you're about. Anything you want to link to them?
Just please follow me on Twitter. I'm grateful that my Twitter is mostly just a grounds for me to talk about film. But, I dabble in politics here or there, but like the things that bring me the most joy and fulfillment and kind of in hope in life and in the way that I communicate with others have to do with cinema. So thank you for listening, and I hope we get to chat someday about Kingdom of Heaven.
Hell yeah. You guys already know who I am. Thanks for listening to this commentary about this great film. I hope you got some insight from it. And if you'd like to see more of these, yeah, definitely check out my YouTube channel, check out my Patreon. And that's about it, really.